Okay, and so we're ready, Board President, if you are.
Okay, let's see, we are right about on time, so we can get started. And we'll call the meeting to order. We want to check for a quorum, please.
You want a roll call? Sorry.
Right,
Yes.
Okay. President Wheeler,
here.
Vice President Vella,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
and Director Jordan.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Public comments. Do we have any public
So
present? I
none,
don't believe so.
none and that were received, but hold 1 second. We just got a phone caller from number, the last 4 digits are 8554. If you could identify yourself, please. Caller 805-458-8554. If you could identify yourself, please.
Maybe Alan.
Maybe. It might be Al Labassiere.
What's
Oh, hi. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
good. Is that you? Is that your phone number ending 8554, Al?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you. All right, Board President. So far, I'm not aware, we did not get any emails, and I'm not aware of any of the members that are on tonight are members of the public. They're consultants, and of course, Nicole Sankula is here from Bosca for one of the items on the agenda.
Okay. So item 3 on our agenda is agenda review. Any additions, deletions, or items that anyone would like to pull? I'm not seeing any interest in that. So we can go on to acknowledgements and presentations.
Okay, thank you. So tonight we have with us, and sorry that she couldn't get her Zoom link to work, but we have Administrative Specialist Laura Ravella that we are bringing before you, Board of Directors, in acknowledgement of her 9¼ years of service to the Mid-Peninsula Water District. Laura is retiring and she will be going out on leave in a couple of weeks. And we want to wish her the best, obviously, because she came to us as a temp to hire back in 2012 when I started here. And she's been working diligently since then. She started as an admin assistant and has proven herself with her organization skills and the adeptness at a few functions, which is a requirement in order to be moved from that classification to administrative specialist to be promoted in this past year. So we want to say congratulations to you, Laura. It's well deserved. I'm very proud of you. I'm always proud when employees go out for the right reasons and to enjoy their lives and their families. And so with that, I was going to see if turn it over to the board, and then the rest of the staff can comment after that. It's yours, board.
Anyone on the board who'd like to? Louis, I see you.
Yes, I too want to echo what the general manager said. Laura, congratulations. I wish you well. And as a matter of fact, I did have a short conversation with Tammy today, and I go like, are you sure she's been with us for 9 years? Because I remember when we hired you. And I can't believe it's been already 9½ years. So, so I hope it was fun for you, as it was fun for us getting to know you. And thank you so much for your services. Wish you the very best. And when somebody leaves their profession to move on to something else, and they do it on their terms, and they do it when they're healthy, nothing can beat that, because you definitely have a whole life ahead of you, and we wish you the very best, and we wish you well. Okay, congratulations.
I don't see anyone else with their hand up. I'd like to also thank Laura for her service Unfortunately, since most of my time on the board has been during the pandemic, I'm not sure that I would recognize her because of the masking issues. But I do appreciate all of the effort that everyone had to go through in the office to try and keep things going. And thank you for that.
And then staff, Rena, Monique,
Yeah.
or Rano, we'll start with
Yeah,
Rena.
I'd like to say a few things about Laura, because I'm here in the office. I get to hear lots of things besides, what I'm focusing on. And so one of the things that I'll always remember about Laura is how she made our customers feel when they would come in. She had developed relationships with a lot of the customers, and some of our customers, they come here because they want to have some interaction with folks. And I always just kind of got this feeling that Laura made those people feel like they're part of a family. And that's something you can have in a community our size and in a district that's not too big. We get to know people. So that's one thing I always appreciate about Laura, is her ability to connect with our customers. And on top of that, as Tammy mentioned, she's one of the more organized folks. I mean, you look at my desk and look at hers, and you can see what Tammy means. And so, Laura, I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and we're going to miss you. Thanks.
Monique?
Yes, I'd like to say a couple of things. I agree with Tammy and everyone else in that Laura is definitely very organized. One of the projects that I was working on is the records retention, and the archive list was prepared by Laura. So easy to follow. It was so great. And I don't know if I've ever actually acknowledged that. So I just wanted to take a moment today and say, thank you for that. You made it so easy for both myself and
Connor.
blank screen. Okay,
Yeah.
So anyway, but she's also very organized and very responsive. So I really appreciate all of those attributes of hers.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else, Rano?
Yeah, just expanding a little bit on what Rena said. Laura and I were kind of near the window when pre-COVID, when people were coming in, and there are a few times where customers came in and they'd look at me, but then they'd look for Laura because they're used to her helping them, and they had a rapport with her. So that just shows her commitment to the customer. And on a personal note, when I first started, things were a little bit hectic. We were short-staffed, and Laura took the time to train me, and she's always been there as a friend and as support. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Laura.
Awesome. Anybody else? I don't know if we have any other staffers on. Okay, Laura, you want to say some things? Are you muted? Did we lose her? Hold on.
She's on the phone. She might have
I
to do
see
something
it.
different.
Okay, you are muted, Laura. I don't know why it won't let me unmute you, but it won't.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
God. Sorry. I'm like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
you did hear all those fine comments about you, right?
I did. I
Okay,
heard.
good.
I kept saying thank you, but I don't think anybody heard me.
No,
Okay,
you're
now
on mute.
I'm off mute. So
You're good.
thank
Go
you very
ahead.
much, everybody.
You're so welcome. Anything else you want to add or say?
I've had a wonderful time there. As everybody says, your work people are more like your family than anybody else because you're with them most of the time. But yeah, I'm going to miss everybody. But I am going to enjoy my retirement too.
Well deserved. Okay, great. Thank you for joining
Thank
us too tonight. I'm sorry you had some sign-in complications, but thanks for being here. The board always likes when the employees show up.
All right. Thank you.
All right, take
Have a
care,
good
Laura.
evening. Huh?
You too.
Bye.
Take care. Okay, that's it on that item.
Okay. So moving on to the consent agenda.
District Council asked to make a statement before the consent agenda is considered.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know, thanks, Tammy, we do talk about in the regular agenda in 7E, discussing the return to in-person board meetings. But on the consent agenda 5C, we are reaffirming the board's findings to continue meeting virtually. And I just wanted to give a quick update. We've been watching and waiting to see if the governor would do anything to change the ability of local agencies to meet through teleconferencing without having to comply with the Brown Act teleconferencing rules, which have been suspended as long as the state of emergency is still in existence. And although the governor did rescind some executive orders last month, he did not rescind the state of emergency. And even though there was political pressure for him to do so, he did not. So the state of affairs is that as long as that state of emergency is still in place and the board continues to believe it's safest to meet virtually, the board may continue to do so. And that's I just wanted to give that update.
Thanks, Julie.
So then item 5C is appropriate for us to continue based on our discussions in the past.
Yes.
So, so we need a motion to approve the consent calendar, the consent agenda, right?
Yes, unless anybody has any minor questions associated with the items in the consent agenda.
Yeah, I'm prepared to move, but.
Go ahead and
Brian-
move.
No, Brian has his hand up though.
Yes, Brian.
I think there were some minor corrections to the minutes that
To
were
the
going to be
minutes?
made.
Yes, Monique, were you going to bring those up? One was ministerial and one was correcting which board member mentioned about the playing fields at Ralston. One was a typo.
Right, one was a typo that it was lesser versus lesser.
Yeah,
And so I can make that correction, no problem. And the other one was giving the credit for the suggestion made by Director Jordan instead of Director Schmidt.
yeah.
So I can make that change also.
Thank you for Director Smith for bringing those to our attention in advance.
Okay,
Very good. Anything else?
None
So
for
I'll-
not that I can see.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second,
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, are you ready for a roll call?
Yes,
Okay, Director Vella,
Yes,
Director Schmidt,
yes,
Director Jordan,
Yes.
and President Wheeler.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passed.
Moving on to item 6, hearings and appeals. We are back to looking at the division map approval hearing.
Correct. Thank you, President Wheeler. And we have tonight with us Liz Stitt. And I think Kat, are you here? Yeah, Kat. I thought there was somebody else here from redistricting. Kat, are you with redistricting? I see somebody named Kat on here. I thought maybe they were with redistricting partners too. So,
No.
Oh, are you a member of the public? I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
I am, yes, no problem.
Oh, good. What's your last name, Kat? I apologize. I would have identified you in the beginning. I missed that.
No worries, it's actually Kat Wolfing, but I'm here as a member of the public.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. All right. I appreciate that, Kat. You know, I was like going, there's
Yeah.
not too many people with that name, Kat. So I was almost going to call you Kat Wolfing. Oh, wow. There's a baby. Okay.
Yes, sorry, that's why I'm on mute.
No,
and
that's okay.
camera off.
Thank you. All right. So item 6A this evening is Division Map Plan 2. And this is the map that the board all talked about last month as being the preferred option. And we also now have the drafted ordinance 122 that I worked on with District Council. Thank you very much, Julie and team. And this provides for the at-large election system to move to a division-based election system in November of 2022. You'll see here in the recommendations section by staff that I mentioned the 3 public comments that we received between the last board meeting and this moment right now, because I see none in my emails. There are 3 for the record. Dennis Bulbo that we received on 2/28. He supported Division Map 2. And Kristen Mercer, the same date, February 28th, supported Division Map 2. And then from Donald Caro on March 7th and 8th, we had a little back and forth, who did not support districting at all or the unfunded state mandates. And then you will open and close the public hearing if it doesn't look like anybody's here yet. And then at the end, you will adopt ordinance number 22. But before all of that, we're going to turn it over to Liz, because tonight, once she presents this, the maps, and she will talk about the sequencing, and then we will be ready to open the public hearing. So Liz, I see you turned your camera on. Thank you and welcome. And it's all yours. Okay.
Awesome. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
You can. Otherwise, yeah. So whatever, I've got your presentation here too. So whichever is
Oh,
comfortable
great.
for you.
If you just want to flip through
I
it.
will be happy to. Let me make it smaller so they all fit on. There we go. Go ahead. You just tell me when to flip.
All right. Well, just like Tammy said, tonight we'll be making that decision to select a map. We'll go over both the maps that we provided you in the past. But first, these are the traditional redistricting principles that we used during this process. You're probably very used to this by now. I think this is your 3rd time saying this. So first, we made sure that each division is relatively equal in size, and that's according to US Census data population. Then every district is contiguous, so it's a whole piece and it's not jumping from one side of the city or area to the next. And then keep districts compact, so we are avoiding those funny looking shapes, maintaining communities of interest, and then following city, county, local government lines when practicable. This includes things like man-made divisions and natural boundaries as well, so creeks or highways. And next slide. Right, so we have provided you with 2 maps, draft plan 1, draft plan 2. Last time we heard draft plan 2 was favored by the board, so we'll be focusing a little bit more on that, but I do want to go over draft plan 1 one last time. And next slide. So here you can see draft plan 1. The biggest difference between this plan and plan 2, it's really divisions 4 and 5. So division 4 sort of hooks around the college. It keeps the university whole. And then it ends and 5 goes under it. And go to the next slide. It does give us a deviation of 7.3. So we are under that 10% maximum that is allowed. Next slide. But this is the map that you all seem to have preferred. So again, divisions 1, 2, and 3, relatively similar to plan 1. It really is that division with, gosh, what's El Camino Real? That is the separator between 4 and 5. And next slide. And it gives us a total deviation of 9.3. Again, it is under the 10% deviation that is allowed. And next. So these are just the 2 plans side to side. So you can see it, that is plan 1, plan 2, and then sequencing. So tonight you will need to pick a sequencing plan as well. That essentially determines when you all are up for election and when folks vote. So you'll see here, we have recommended a sequencing plan for you all. Division 3, 4, and 5 should be up in 2022. And then division 1 and 2 should be up in 2024. And next slide. And this is just a visual representation of the sequencing. So you can see 1 and 2 next to each other, both up in 2024 as recommended, and then 3, 4, and 5 in 2022. And next slide. And so as you can see, that essentially concludes this districting process, and happy to take questions.
And that's all,
Okay.
President Wheeler. I did want to add, we did do a blast. And I stated in my staff report, we did a blast down on next door to make sure everyone was aware of the hearing, the final hearing this evening. John did a really good advertisement, and Jeanette, I want to give credit to both of them to get this in the Daily Journal one last time. And then the website was updated, and he did a great job making sure that the information was easy to access, and that if you couldn't get into the Street View map feature or it was more cumbersome, we used the street boundary definitions. They were long and large, but someone could use them, and John did a good job pointing those out too for each division so people could follow that as well. And that's all.
Okay. Kathy, you have a question?
I do. Thank you for the presentation. For the sequencing, I just wanted to ask, was there a particular rationale for how the recommendation came with 2022 doing 3, 4, and 5 and 2024 doing 1 and 2?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that assuming you all choose this map, for those board members who are in those divisions, it would naturally follow the election for when they are up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, it just so happened that that's how it fell.
Yeah.
with y'all's addresses when we got to that part.
So we were fortunate not to have 2 people in one division.
Yep.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. Actually, in both maps, to be exact, but definitely
Yeah.
this one.
That makes it a lot more simple.
Simple, it's just defensible and justifiable, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we can open up the public hearing. And give that a minute and see whether we get any public.
I'm still not seeing any numbers or any folks I don't recognize in the Zoom meeting. So this is the time if anybody did dial in and I'm not recognizing, if you have any public comments.
Okay. Well, not seeing any public comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing.
And let me scroll to the ordinance real quick. Because there was a recommendation here. I'm going to bring up another screen real quick. Sorry, let me find where I had that. I think it was this one. Yes. So in advance of the meeting, Director Schmidt reached out to Julie and I for addition of the language you see on your screen right now. And I just wanted to show him where I put it. So here was the top of the ordinance, Brian, and I just tried to fit it where it best followed in the flow. And this is, if you want to discuss this language that you're proposing, I just wanted to show you where it ended up.
I'm sorry, my screen is tiny. Can you say
Make
where
it
you put
larger. Okay, let me increase the size. It's after it's on the first page, and I added it right before the bottom one, before the 3 positions that are up. And it reads, whereas the board's intention to switch from an at-large to a division-based system is not based on any preference for a division-based system. That's language that Director Schmidt had reached out and wanted to suggest adding to the ordinance.
Is this different than what's in our board package?
It is. I just amended it. Can you see it, Brian?
I don't see it on what I see on the screen.
Do
I
you
only
all
see a
see it?
single screen. I don't.
I can't see enough of the screen to be able to tell what you're talking about.
Okay, let me pause this really quick here. Let me see my new share. Let me bring it up this way right here. Sorry, I didn't switch screens. That's why. How about that? You can see that now?
Aha.
Okay, so sorry.
Okay, the red, all right.
Yeah, you
cool.
see the red? I apologize
Where's-
for that.
Thank you. If I could explain briefly my thinking behind this was that that I didn't want to create the impression that we're doing this because we think it makes a better way to manage the district. And my thought was that imagine hypothetically at some future point, California law is changed and the district will have the opportunity to revert back to an at-large system. Maybe let's say 15 years down the line and maybe none of us are here anymore. Our informal institutional memory might be gone. But I just want to have something in there indicating that we're switching to division-based system, not out of preference. So if they wanted to switch back, they wouldn't think we did this because we thought it was better. That's my intention of proposing that change.
So, I mean, we elsewhere are talking about the fact that we're doing this in order to meet the current law in the elections code, right? But we don't actually mention that in here.
It's in the paragraph, 2 paragraphs above where it says, no, wait, I'm sorry. It's in these first few paragraphs about the water codes. Hold on. It's somewhere in here where I saw CRVA. Talks about the election. I think I just may be in my staff report. Maybe that's what it is. These are just all what our enabling legislation was. Here's the election code. All right, right here. That's where we did the moving toward it. Here it is right here. Sorry. It's now therefore be it ordained. I knew it was in here somewhere that the election from at-large to division-based, number 1, is being made in furtherance of the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act.
Okay. Would it be worthwhile to include that in the section that Brian has proposed?
Julie, it doesn't matter, does it, that we include it down here?
I think it makes sense to have it in the recitals because that's sort of, you're sort of just telling a story, but and I think it makes sense where it is. Just, I think what we're trying to do is just get it on the record. And I think having it in the recitals does that.
You have a couple of hands up, Kurt.
I'm not seeing any hands, but, oh, there. Louis, please.
Yeah, and I know Kathy has some comments too. I'm not exactly following why there is a need for this, Brian. When we were talking about this at the first or 2 meetings ago, we did say that every time there is a new census, we may have to change the districts again. And whether we change them or not, as long as the maps that we have in place, they are going to withstand any legal challenges because we did them according to the rules and we did them according to the criteria that was available to us. I'm not sure I'm understanding why we have to add this, and I would like to understand it, and I'm not. So what we are going to vote on today is not going to be cast in stone forever, regardless. come 10 years from now, when a new census is out, we may have to revisit this. Whoever is here may have to revisit it anyway. I think it's very fortuitous that the divisions happen to fall the way they did, and the next elections is not going to create any difficulties because the three who are up for election would have been up regardless. So I'll reserve my comments for now. That's it.
Kathy, you had a question?
No, I just have some comments, and I actually see where Brian's coming from. And Brian, maybe I don't, just correct me if I'm not following you. I think the intent of having this particular sentence in the recitals is to kind of indicate we're going to district-based elections kind of as a preemptive thing, right? Because a lot of other cities and counties in California are kind of being forced to it. So we're being proactive, but we're being proactive not because we think we need to go, but there are external factors. So I think what the point of having this sentence in the recitals, if 15 years from now, a completely new board comes on, they don't know any of the history, and there's the opportunity to go back to at large, they can go back to these recitals and have some indication that it wasn't our desire to just do this for one reason or another. Did I help explain that a little bit more, Brian? I don't know if I did or not.
If I could respond, that's exactly correct. I could add a little bit of responding to Louis. We don't need to do this. And I will vote for this, even if we don't include this clause. I just think it is a little helpful to explain on the record how we feel, or at least how I feel, that I'd rather not do this, frankly.
Okay.
And in the future.
Okay, Brian, so I apologize. I thought you were making it as a condition, and I go like, now we're gonna make this condition. So I misunderstood that part, and I appreciate you clarifying that. And since I have the floor for a second, if I may, to Kathy's point, no, we're doing it because we don't want to get sued. Let's face it, that's the reason why we're doing it. You know, and I don't want to go through a losing battle. Do I prefer district? No, I don't. I don't, because I represent the entire district, and I want to be elected by the entire district. But we have no other choice, and I will refuse. I will refuse to spend a dime from this district unnecessarily so that I can please an attorney. No way I will do that. That's the reason. I'm being forced to do this. And I'm upset that I have to vote for this. I don't like it. I don't think it's right. It does not represent the entire district, but somebody found a flaw in something, and everybody who fought them lost, and I don't want to lose. I'm a sore loser when it gets to people's money. I admit. That's all. All right. Thank you. Now I get off my soapbox.
Yeah, I have no objection to including this sentence in information. I thought that it might be worthwhile to mention the legislation that we were responding to, but doesn't make that much difference. If we're saying that we don't have any preference for it, that's probably enough.
If it's all right, I'll make the motion to approve this with whereas added, everything else to be the same.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you.
Okay. You ready for a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay, great. Director Schmidt?
Yes.
Director Jordan?
Yes.
Vice President Vela?
Yes.
And President Wheeler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And
Thank
thank
you
you,
all.
Liz, very much for your work, and I'll be in touch for all the hard work we got to do now with the elections office. So we appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah, I'm sure there may be a few odds and ends to do beforehand. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of work that we have to do now. So thank you for being here tonight.
We'll be in touch, and thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Moving on to our regular business agenda. We are now on item 7A. So Tammy, you want to explain this for us?
Yes, thank you, President Wheeler. Tonight, we are fortunate to have the CEO from Bosca, Nicole Sankula. So thank you, Nicole, for being here. She's here for questions, and she's certainly, we're going to tag team because she is most knowledgeable and has been the probably the victor throughout this whole thing because of the fact that she's had to shepherd us all together through these past several years and make sure that, you know, she was part of, you know, making sure all 26 agencies would be at the table in order to do this. So the first item, there's 2 items, and they can be after both we discuss each one, you can adopt both resolutions in one fell swoop if you choose to do that. This first one is an amendment to the water supply agreement, and I've provided some background. I shouldn't say the council for Bosca. I don't want to take credit because this was a lot of work to put together. I'm sure Allison Schutte with Hanson Bridget provided us as wholesale customers with the background information because it is long and laborious for sure with the water supply agreement that each one of our agencies has. And specific to the district here at the bottom of page 39 is the fact that the first amendment was adopted by this board on January 24th, 2019. And that was ministerial items and management items, as you might recall. I know Kathy won't recall that. She wasn't on the board at the time, but that was the first time. And at that time, we made a commitment because the minimum purchase agencies wanted to be involved in a negotiation that allowed them some opportunity to talk about or to sell what they were finding unaffordable, quite frankly, because of their consumption patterns and the changes in the trends as a result of all the drought and the fact that the trends have lowered down and they didn't need as much of that minimum purchase water throughout these years and still don't. And they wanted to have an option or something available to them to where they could sell that off. And as the board might recall, because this was the board in place, I received direction, very clear direction from this board to make sure that whatever negotiations were going on, that the ratepayers for the Mid-Peninsula Water District were not financially impacted throughout this whole process. And Nicole can attest that I took that position clear to that table, those tables of negotiation and made sure we weren't the only other agency that promoted that fact either. There were several other agencies as well that wanted to make sure there were no financial impacts to their ratepayers as well. The other things that the board asked for is just that, hey, where's the stability, you know, and guaranteeing that this won't ever be a give back. And the third thing the board asked was, is there going to be a level of reporting so that, you know, we as water managers will know that, you know, what's going on behind the scenes, and as the new transferee, you know, accepting the responsibility and doing their part, and or when does the transfer become permanent of that water. So without going into too specific of details, all of those things throughout the years were met. It took a lot, and I really do want to credit, you know, the Bosca staff and Nicole, because there was a lot of back and forth. And you know, the fact that she has 26 bosses on the board of director, and then she has 26 or more of us water managers, because it wasn't just us as the water managers. At times she involved the lawyers. At times there were other members of the staff of some of these agencies. She had to deal with staff transitions coming in and out and trying to explain all this. I seriously do not know how we got through it, but I can now say at the end of it, that's why it took almost 4 years to do, is because of all the changes that happened over these 4 years. So, you know, there are positives and benefits for allowing this, and the drought helped to promote a lot of those. It definitely shows that this region is going to be capable of these types of transfers, and showing that, you know, if water is not going to get used, that it's going to be repurposed. I like to use that word, because, you know, it's not wasted by any means, but it also helps that original contracting agency, because they don't have to be out as much money as they now have to be out, because it's a contractual obligation for each one of them. And then at the same time, I think it just helps to show that we're doing everything we can here within the San Francisco Regional Water System to make these kinds of things happen. And we're not just sitting back saying, no, you've got a contract, therefore you need to honor it. We're trying to show that these things can work and that we can negotiate them and provide that water to be used where it's most needed, if it's not needed at the original contracting agency. Nicole, I was going to see if there's any specifics or anything, you know, you wanted to bring up or say in addition to that for this one item.
Absolutely. First, thank you very much, board members, for having me here. Thank you, Tammy, for inviting me. I'm pleased to speak on this item. A couple things I just want to emphasize that you heard from Tammy. First has been her role in these negotiations. You know, as she mentioned, there's generally 26 at the table plus the BOSCA staff. At any given time, there were up to 45 people in the room, 50 at times, because there was attorneys, there were city managers, there were agency managers, if they're different than the water management reps. In all of those cases, the direction that you provided, Tammy, was actually incredibly helpful because she spoke both with her own personal amount of confidence, which she always brings into the room, which I appreciate, and she knows because I tap her on the shoulder a lot, but also knowing that it was with the direction from you, and it was very, very helpful and very powerful in that room to really make dramatic moves in a certain direction. And I am speaking in particular to this issue of ensuring that your customers were not paying anything. There was no financial cost to your customers, and I would say also no water supply impact to your customers. Those two criteria were so critical, and Tammy was a lead in those arguments that really made a difference in how they went to what you have before you, which is a action that, you know, I can affirm to you meets those criteria. So it is definitely on behalf of her advocacy that you have this in front of you, and I think it made it all the better. It doesn't make everybody happy, certainly, because there are other agencies that would have wanted something else, but that's part of a negotiation, right? And also the reporting is another thing that she got out of it. So I think those, you know, that role has shown up in what you see before you. And as Tammy said, it is a complex in its implementation amendment, but at the end of it, it's really a simple concept. And it's the idea that there are 4 agencies that have an obligation to buy a minimum amount of water, and they are interested in potentially selling that along with their permanent part of their allocation, because there are some agencies that might be willing to buy it. And we're in a water scarce situation. So this is about trying to facilitate even more a market, and that benefits all of you. So those are the things that I really wanted to hit on.
And I was going to show this page because I think, you know, BOSCA taking the time to do this little cheat sheet, this fact sheet was really helpful. And I hope it helped you all when you reviewed these items. And it's at your page 54. You can see the minimum purchase agencies here in the middle of the page. Alameda County Water District means 7.6 is their minimum purchase contract, MGDs. Milpitas at 5.3 MGDs, Mountain View at 8.9 MGDs, and Sunnyvale at 8.9, which is a total of almost 31 MGDs. And so we don't, you know, many of us don't want that 31 MGDs in the pool because it has to be paid for somehow, because San Francisco is relying on us through these minimum purchase agreements to purchase that water. So these agencies, whether they use it or not, they have to pay for this water, which is very, very expensive when they're not using it, because they either have a blend of groundwater and or they just have lower usage and they're not utilizing all of it or even maybe half of it in certain times. So thank you for putting this together, Nicole. I thought it was useful for the board and even the public, you know, to be able to help better understand this. It was simple. So hopefully it was helpful. And that's all, board. If you have questions on this item before we move to the next amendment.
Kathy was first up.
Yes. So thank you, Tammy, for spending time with me yesterday to go over this in detail. I appreciate that. I did have one question, And I just want to ask it again, just in case anyone else might have the same question. So when I was going over the agreement, I noticed the San Jose and Santa Clara County. So I don't know, Tammy, if you could explain how you explained it to me on email, that there's a different part of the agreement that I wasn't quite aware of. It's
Yes.
on page 3 or page 44.
44 right here. Yeah, I was just going to
Yeah.
look for that. So thank you very much for that reference. Okay, so it's in this resolution, and thank you, Nicole, too, for helping to explain it. And it regarded San Jose and Santa Clara. And I have to admit, you know, the first time when I'm scrolling through here, it's like, okay, now why did we bounce from minimum purchase to Santa Clara and San Jose, right? And that was the exact concern Kathy had. And actually, even talking with Nicole, she says, that's a great question, because she's been at several of these presentations. In fact, when she told me she has to almost be on everyone's calendar for city council meetings and board meetings, it made good sense. So as part of the original negotiations, Santa Clara and San Jose are interruptible customers, meaning they're using water right now, but they're not permanent customers. As we've all stepped back, and I go back 10 years, it's always been meant to make them permanent customers. So as part of this process, they're agreeing to do this, is that they were included in this resolution to their points of, we intend, and we want to make sure that everyone knows we intend to be supported when it comes our term for an amendment as permanent customers within the regional water system. Did I summarize that correctly, Nicole?
Yeah, well, and this was because, remember when I mentioned not everybody got what they wanted out of this amendment? You know, San Jose and Santa Clara would love to buy a minimum purchase transfer from one of the permanent agencies and make that a way to become permanent. But that is not something that was acceptable to the permanent agencies. They were unwilling. So these transfers are limited to only permanent wholesale customers. So San Jose and Santa Clara cannot participate. But you do need them to sign, and you do need them to agree to this, because they're a part of the contract that you share with San Francisco. So in exchange for their willingness to agree to this, despite the fact that it didn't meet their needs, they wanted a reaffirmation of exactly the current rights that are already stated in the WSA, but they wanted them put in front ahead. So that's what this does.
And as far as I'm concerned, we're okay with that. Thank you for that question, though, Kathy. Louis?
Louis?
Mute? Yes, thank you. Nicole, good to see you.
Yes, good.
It's been a long time. 2 days, actually.
Yeah.
So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the a lot of work that was done here. And all I can say is that you know, having multiple agencies, you know, 44 in a room around a table, you know, when you go to a negotiating table, any negotiating table, if you go with the premise that you're going to get everything you want, then you're not negotiating. You're just fighting for whatever is due to you and whatever is not due to you. And either you're going to go with the sense of having some type of a consensus that, you know, you may not get everything, but hopefully you'll be happy with, and everybody else will be happy. And you, when you go to that with that premise, that means that you are prepared to look at somebody else and to see how the negotiations are going to make somebody else happy as well. Okay, so congratulations for herding all these cats together. That's not easy, I'm sure. Question that I have, and I'm sure it was addressed at some point, is how do you see this type of agreement, especially with the minimum purchase of the one that are affected, as rewarding or not those agencies that do a good job in conserving and those that do not do a good job in conserving? How does that get into the mix? And so that I won't have to ask another question, and I have the floor right now, I I had a conversation with a guy who wrote something in the newspapers recently, and he was kind of in my face a little bit. You know, he goes like, how do you guys force us to conserve this and mandate this and 50%, 15% and all of that stuff? And the state is coming in with more housing. How are we going to have water for all these thousands of housing that we are short of? He said, you know, I don't know how you can make this balance, because on one hand, you're saying one thing, and on the other hand, the reality is something totally different. And it's not something that is hidden. We all can see it. So if you could comment on those, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So on the first one, you know, this is not really designed or targeted towards a conserving or a non-conserving agency, but what it does do is, and I think this is, you've got two items next, we're talking about the wholesale rates, right? But collectively, the wholesale customers share in the cost of the system. So to the extent that purchases decrease, assuming costs stay the same, if purchases decrease, you all pay a greater rate, right? That's just the way it has to work. So if you flip that around, and that's been what's been going on, but if you flip that around and you say, but hey, we've got water available, those minimum purchase agencies are not buying all the water that they can from San Francisco. So if there's an ability to move that water to an agency that wants to buy it, and they're buying it for communities, they're buying it for water customers, and generally it's a new water customer, then they're increasing overall sales, and the result is everybody else pays less. Your unit rate will go down. That is the phenomena among you. So that is one of the immediate benefits that you all get. To the extent that you are moving existing supplies among you, it allows the unit rate to go down, which is really a benefit to your customers, specifically in Mid-Peninsula, and that's really regardless of whether you're conserving or not. But as far as how does this fit into how do we meet the needs for future water customers, that is exactly one of the reasons why we did this. There is one of the BOSCA member agencies, the City of Brisbane, up in the north of the peninsula. They have a very large proposed development in their town. The City of Brisbane doesn't have enough room within its allocation from San Francisco to provide the water for that development. Despite the fact that that development is coming in, I think it's LEED Platinum, they're recycling everything they can. I mean, they've forced all the green building standard codes and above to get the water footprint as low as possible. Brisbane doesn't have the water to provide it. So Brisbane actually cannot approve the development. So the developers are out looking for water. And one of the options they're interested in is trying to buy it from another BOSCA agency. And the agencies that have the greatest interest in selling a portion of their water are those that have the minimum purchase obligation. And so that was the conversation that started 5 years ago on both sides. Minimum purchase agency said, hey, I really want to offload this. And Brisbane was like, well, hey, these developers are really interested in buying it. Maybe this might work. And so that's the idea. And if you extend it and you say, okay, well, if eventually the wholesale customers, if this transfer does happen to Brisbane, you all benefit because your price goes down, which is different than if, say, the developer goes out and buys water from outside the system and they just wheel it through the system. You get no financial benefit from that. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So President Wheeler, do you want me to move on to the next one and you all will consider them together, or do you want to consider each resolution separately?
I had a couple of short questions. One was, it details what the minimum limits are on these individual BOSCA members who have this minimum purchase requirement. Is that their only allocation, the minimums? Do they have some
No, so
additional?
they have a minimum, and then they have the same thing that you have, which is a supply guarantee, right? So
Okay.
they have their individual supply guarantee, which is more than their minimum. And the ratios between them are different. They date back to before 1984. But they have both. They have a minimum and then a full supply guarantee.
Okay. So this would not necessarily make any difference to the 185 million gallons that the regional system provides or is allocating, correct?
Correct. So, right. So a premise of this was that the 184 MGD supply assurance, which is shared collectively among the permanent wholesale customers, so again, not San Jose and Santa Clara, that remains the same. It doesn't increase and it doesn't decrease. You're just shifting it. You're allowing it to shift amongst you.
Okay.
By transfers.
And so the transfers may reduce the amount of additional supply that the regional system is going to be looking for in the next 10, 20 years to increase their reliability. Because I remember Steve Ritchie at a meeting that I attended in 2019 had a list of a dozen different projects that they were evaluating as far as potentials for increased supply. And those are still going to be out there somewhere.
Right. Those projects, so San Francisco to date has indicated that it is not intending to increase the supply assurance to the permanent wholesale customers or provide more permanent water supply to them. What this study is, those studies at San Francisco and that Steve mentioned on additional projects are actually part of the alternative water supply program, and they're projects to deal with the impacts of the adopted Bay Delta plan. So they're primarily dry year projects, drought type projects to backfill the impact of that. So it doesn't change the allocation to all of you, but it changes the reliability, because basically the adopted Bay Delta plan, as you'll recall from your urban water management plan effort, you know, if it gets implemented, the system will be subject to significant reductions during multiple drought years. So that's the supplies that San Francisco is investigating is really targeted at that, plus potential supplies to make San Jose and Santa Clara permanent. So it's those two things.
Okay.
If I may, I have a little follow-up.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Nicole, going back to that example that you brought up earlier about the housing project in Brisbane. So whichever agency wanted to offload and Brisbane wanted to purchase, okay, then the agency that wanted to offload at some point, if they needed it, that water is still theirs though, right? Or once they offload, they offload.
This is a permanent, permanent transfer. So again, that was a very critical piece of these negotiations, and it's part of the existing WSA already.
Of course, yeah.
Transfers that are currently allowed.
Exactly, it had to be that way to work. Yeah, and it's a very, very bold move, you know. But yeah, Brisbane will not be able to survive without it, because the you know, the need is gonna remain, you know. So okay, all right, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So why don't we go on to the item B, and that may illuminate any additional questions we may have on item A.
It's actually a sample case, if you will.
Right.
You know, when I was putting it together, I was like, okay, this is, you know, easy for those of us to follow it that have been engaged in it, but it is kind of a case study, right? So 7B involves the minimum purchase transfer from the city of Mountain View to the city of East Palo Alto. if I were one of you, I would say, why the heck do we have this on our agenda, right? So I said that in the very end of the staff report. You'll notice I was like, okay, if I was them, I'd ask this. So here's the answer. It requires approval by wholesale customers and SFPC. And that's one of the things that we should feel good about, that anytime these things happen, we're going to know about them, okay? Because they require this approval by the wholesale customers. So I attached the agreement. They want to transfer up to 1 MGD of their minimum purchase, which again, theirs was, I think, 8 or almost 9 MGDs in their total. And they want to do it in increments of quarter MGD. And that's probably because they're the first one doing it and they're wanting to take, I call these baby steps and making sure that it happens. And then they'll eventually, based on their use patterns, they'll eventually, East Palo Alto will have that minimum purchase transfer responsibility permanently. It's on their own. But if something were to happen, it's always going to fall back on Mountain View to make sure that, you know, they are responsible until it becomes permanent with EPA. I attached their agreement and I thought it was important that you see it, but I want to just show you one thing before Nicole adds her pieces. This is the actual agreement, and we're not asking you to look at it for legal format or any of that. It's just the transaction, right? But at the very end, and I'm sorry that Matt wasn't able to make it tonight, but I knew he would be the one who would love this spreadsheet because there are, as Nicole said, mountainous spreadsheets behind this to get to this simplified spreadsheet, and it's still not simple, to show how the minimum purchase works from Mountain View to East Palo Alto. And it's a lot of work and there's a lot of details, and I don't envy the people that have to track this and keep up with this. But your action tonight as one of the 26 wholesalers is to say yes or no to this so that they can move on in their transaction. And Nicole, I was going to turn it over to you if there was anything else you want to add since you've had the benefit of attending other board meetings, the city council meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Tammy said, this is kind of the first case, and this is really necessary or being put before you because back in 2017, Mountain View did want to transfer a part of its minimum purchase and its ISG to East Palo Alto, but there was we hadn't negotiated the answer of how to do that yet. We weren't even thinking about it at that point. And so under pressure and feelings of obligation, whatever reason, Mountain View chose at that time to just transfer its ISG to East Palo Alto and continued to be concerned that they were being targeted and had this issue with their minimum purchase. So once we identified a protocol to protect the interests of the other wholesale customers, Mountain View then went back to East Palo Alto and said, okay, great. Yeah, we know you paid us for the money for the transfer, but we would like you to take some of our minimum purchase obligation. Will you do that? And this agreement is kind of what they worked out, which is essentially Mountain View holds the full responsibility, which is where it's slightly different than the amendment, because in the amendment, once the transfer happens, the full responsibility goes to the transferee, to the agency that's buying it. In this instance, Mountain View holds the full responsibility until East Palo Alto builds in completely to their new temporary modified minimum purchase, at which point then that minimum transfers over to East Palo Alto in these quarter increments, and then they get a right of first refusal for the potential of dry year transfers if Mountain View ever decides to do it. So that's why you're acting on it, because it's not quite what the amendment is, because some of it happened ahead of time. But in reality, it is consistent in the protections that it offers to you.
And that concludes our report on this one, unless there's questions. And I've got up on the screen Resolution 2022-07, which approves this agreement.
Unless there are any other questions, I'm prepared to move this resolution.
Or both resolutions at one time, please, since we didn't do the first one.
Is your resolution for both
Yes,
agreements?
this
Louis?
one on the screen is 2022-07 and the
I
first one is
actually-
2022-06.
I actually was waiting to see if there were any other comments before
Right.
I do that. Yeah, and it will be for both. Yes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that looking at this East Palo Alto Mountain View agreement, what I did like about it was they were doing the increments and they had to be justified based on new development, that it wasn't just sort of, oh, if they decide they wanted to do it, they could do it anytime they wanted to. They had to have a process to justify it.
The need for East Palo Alto for an additional water supply was a critical component to a lot of discussions in early 2017. You may recall some of the news articles at that time. You know, they had at that point reached their individual supply guarantee and had implemented a building moratorium within the town, despite having a lot of development pressures that the town wanted in order to really redevelop itself. So it resulted in 2 transfers to East Palo Alto, one from Mountain View, and actually a subsequent transfer from Palo Alto as well for those developments.
Okay. So we have a resolution or a motion.
Yes, I'll be happy to move approval of resolution 2022-7 and 2022-6 as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Are you ready for a roll call?
Yes.
Okay, great. Vice President Vella,
Yes.
Director Jordan,
Yes.
Director Smith,
We didn't hear you, Brian.
Sorry, that's a yes.
Thank you.
and President Wheeler.
Yes.
Okay, a motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Nicole, for spending the time with us this evening. I know you've had so many of these meetings, and it's just incredible that you were able to fit us in this month. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate being here.
And good to
Thank you,
see you.
Nicole.
So
you.
she's going to hang around for
you.
one more item because Lewis asked for it at our finance committee meeting. The very next item is about the projected wholesale water rate increase. And thank you, Nicole, for just these extra couple of minutes with us. The board had asked, or the finance committee had asked, and we have a requirement in order to do this projected pass-through that SFPUC believes will be effective on July 1st. Everything is pointing to 15.9%, which equates to a 65 cents per unit of water. Right now, the Mid-Peninsula Water District pays $4.10, and it will go up to $4.75 effective July 1st. And we are showing you here that for our budget, based on what we project to be spending for water this year, that results in an additional $908,000. So just under $1 million worth of additional water purchases for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. So staff proposes to do a pass-through. This district right now is outside of a rate plan. It's outside of the rate plan for a couple of years, and you all know because you've had a presentation, a preliminary one from HF&H, which we hope to get back before you again in the fall so that we can, find out when the schedule for the rate plan for this district will be next. But in the meantime, in order to do a pass-through, we have to do a Proposition 218 process. I'm sorry that the notice wasn't available tonight. John really tried hard, but he's a pickleball player and he's in the middle of a massive tournament. That's just the honest to God response I got from him. We have to let him do those things. So he came out for a meeting yesterday and just said, I am so slammed. I'm not going to be able to get that notice done for your board meeting. It's rather simple. We've involved district council and the proposed date to get that out is the first week of April, because we have a 45-day notice, and the proposed protest hearing is in the May regular board meeting, May 26th. That's going to be quite the busy meeting for the board. And I just wanted to show you that the revenue requirements of 908,000, this is just an in and out. So all we're proposing is to pass this along to the customer. There's no markup or anything on this. And the major reason SFPC needs this increase when they did their budget and their presentation to their commission is because of the reduced and the expected reduced consumption to make those rates whole. And then there is capital improvements going on continuing throughout the regional water system that are necessary to be upgraded and funded. So Nicole, did I miss anything about what the SFPC is projecting? Oh, and you can talk about the balancing account and why and how that helped this process if you want to.
Yeah, I think I might add to that. So, you know, one of the things in your contract is a thing called the balancing account, which is essentially becomes the fund where if the wholesale customers collectively pay each year more or less than they owe to San Francisco at the end of the year, it either is a balance owed to the wholesale customers or a balance due from the wholesale customers. What has happened in the last 5 years, you have actually not had a rate increase from San Francisco. And in each of those years, what's gone on is the wholesale customers have effectively purchased more than San Francisco planned for. That has resulted in a balancing account balance owed to the wholesale customers as of last June, so the end of last fiscal year, of $86 million. Again, speaking to the value of your general manager and her voice in the room with the water management reps, because that's the group that I talk to when we confer about things like this. And we've asked them in the last several years, what do you want to do with that balance? Do you want San Francisco to hold it? Do you want them to refund it to you? And it has been a strong voice led by Tammy. Hold it. We know we're going to need it. Just hold. I mean, you get interest on it and all that stuff. And hold it for when we need it, more like a rate stabilization purpose. And that is exactly the purpose it's serving for this current fiscal year. So because water sales this year are down so much due to the drought, they're using about half of it. So your sales are, you underpaid, are going to underpay estimated sales San Francisco about $44 million this year. So they're going to pull down from the balancing account, and then they're projecting to use the other half next fiscal year so that it will be completely zeroed out within 2 years. And that is offsetting the increase that Tammy's talking about. So it's really doing its job, which is great. And so I think that's the only thing I would add, except that, you know, we will get the official rate notice from San Francisco around April 10th, and then the commission will consider it at May 10th at its meeting.
Thank you, Nicole. So staff just wanted to, in this item, share that information, and just as long as we have a general consensus from the board that you're approving the scheduling of the Prop 218 hearing on May 26th. As long as staff knows that, that's what we're going to finalize in that notice. And that's so that it can be effective July 1st. Every month that goes by that we don't do it by May 26th just means about $80,000, $75,000 of lost revenues that we're going to be paying for additional water. Or additional costs of water, I'm sorry, not additional water, a higher cost for water, wholesale water.
Tammy, didn't we have a projection from SFPUC a year or so, two ago, that said they were going to come back for a large rate increase, not necessarily this coming year, but the year after or something like that? Yes. Because they were expecting to have a large capital program starting up?
They remember we've showed slides where they make their projections, and Nicole, he's referring to like the slides from the wholesale meeting where I've showed, you know, the future projected increases, and those fluctuate. Just like Nicole said, we didn't expect as water managers that half of the balancing account was going to be needed this year. Nobody could have anticipated that until the drop in use was proving that. And you know that because Rena's delivered the drought report every month. I mean, even our customers ourselves in our system have reduced their use. So obviously those revenues have to be made up. So no one, and that discussion was very heavy at the water managers rep. It's like, oh my goodness, we're having to use 40 million this year. And then that 40 million, the question got asked at the meetings about, well, what would have happened if we wouldn't have had it to that 15.9? Help me out, Nicole. Was it like 23, 24% it would have been?
I can't remember the exact number, but it was significant, right?
It was
I mean,
large.
we were really capping, reducing the impact of the
Yeah.
drought right now. And they, would have had to look at something different.
So it is a
I don't
blend.
know.
Kurt.
I'm not sure exactly what they would have done.
To get back to your question, there is some capital that is the reason that's driving it. That's just necessary to get the system upgraded. And then the majority of it is just lower use among all our agencies.
Anyone have any questions on this item?
All right, thank
Just
you. And
glad we had that money in the
I
kitty.
know,
So,
for sure.
so because if we got that money from them, chances are that the agencies would have probably spent that money somewhere else, and
Yeah.
then we would have had to explain why we're going to have this increase, this large
And
increase.
I did want to share with the whole board, because we talked about it at the finance committee level. Most of the agencies are actually putting a rate increase on top of this pass through. So, I mean, we're kind of fortunate, even though I know we will be having our rate plan soon. So we didn't have to do it this year, but it's possible for next year that we may have a rate increase on top of what is projected next year at about 12% for a rate adjustment. That's very early on, because it's just hard to tell what could happen between now and then. But that's what SPUC sees as a shortfall for next fiscal year, the 23-24 fiscal year. So I'm glad the balancing account is using, it's ratepayer money, and it's benefiting all the ratepayers within the regional water system. And that's exactly what Nicole said. That's why it's there. So thank you, Nicole. Appreciate you being there and being supportive.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Very
Good night.
Thank you, Nicole. Good night.
Tammy, you just need a consensus of the board. We don't need to vote on anything.
There's no formal motion. As long as nobody has a problem, we're going to move forward with the rates notice. And it is literally just for a pass through. And we went ahead and did it for 2 fiscal years, just in case. We just don't know about the rate plan. I mean, we feel confident it'll be ready for next fiscal year, but since we're doing a Prop 218 and it's a massive process, legal and documentation wise, we're going to go ahead and just do the pass-through provisions. So that's it. This, as long as everybody's okay. May 26th is a busy meeting for you all, with the potential for a GM employment agreement and other items. And so that's the best date that we could get to make sure that we could make it implemented, or make it implementable on July 1st.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that takes care of 7C, 7D.
Rena?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. What we have before you is a resolution 2208 asking the board to approve task order 22-22 with the district engineer, Packport Consulting Group, for construction management services in support of our capital project 09-16 CP. It's the one stating here that's improvements on Hastings Drive, improvements on Vine Street and Belmont Canyon. The total request is $104,950 plus a 10% contingency. But you'll see in the staff report, and you'll see in Exhibit A, the district engineer's proposal, that the actual costs are about $155,950. But there is a $51,000 figure in unspent design engineering, and Juba is going to talk about that in a little bit. So it kind of offsets or helps, soften the blow, so to speak. And so our request is to amend the budget with this task order for this particular capital project for $115,450. The fiscal impact is to the capital fund, the certificates of participation. So the money's there and it's budgeted. On the next page, Tammy, on page 74, just a little bit of background. This capital project first came to the board for the district engineer to provide the design services, cost estimating services, preparing plans and specs. And at the time, we had identified the Hastings Drive Improvement Project, the Vine Street, but the Hastings Service Connection Project, those three items, and the board approved a contract for professional services totaling about $243,000. After the board approved it, we thought about it some more. And I think some of it also had to do with, we were in discussions with the city of Belmont and talking to them about some of their road improvements. And we thought, it'd be better to take the Hastings Drive Service Connection Replacement Capital Project out of this. And if you recall, then in February of 2021, we came to the board with an amendment to remove that particular capital project and add the Belmont Canyon water system improvements. Again, in Belmont Canyon, the road there itself, the city of Belmont has, I believe, major road improvement plans that are taking place not too long after we hope that this project is going to be completed. It's going to be sometime in 2023, I believe, if I remember right. So that was the first start for this project, is the engineering, the providing of the engineered plans and the specifications for this project. The board is aware that we put this project out to bid, and on November 17, 2021, not too long ago, the board awarded a construction contract to C2R Engineering in the amount of just under $1.4 million with a 10% contingency. We've had a meeting with C2R, and they've been given a notice to proceed to start in the middle of April with construction of this project. And Jupin could probably give you a little more detail about how long that's going to take. But what we don't have is the construction management services. How are we going to manage that particular project? Something that we normally do. So what I've attached here, you'll see on page 74, and it carries on and onto page 75, what these construction management services are going to entail. It's also part of his letter proposal, which is Exhibit A. But again, what they're going to be doing for the services is reviewing the submittals of the contractor, which is a requirement of the specs. What are they going to build for us? What are the materials they're going to use, and make sure that they meet our standard specifications. That's one of the management services that the engineer provides, and that's what is proposed by the district engineer. They're going to be putting together some of the meetings with the contractor, with key stakeholders. They'll keep on track of the project schedule with the contractor. They'll be looking at the progress payment that the contractor submits monthly to make sure that what they are billing us for is something that they've buried underground or built. They'll also manage the change orders and any claims for change to the contract for this particular project. And then as we get towards the end, they'll be the ones working with us to put together a punch list and the final inspection. So those are the type of things that the construction managers typically do. In addition, you'll notice that in their proposal, they are also, they have three sub-consultants too that are providing other additional services. You see there's Romig Engineering to do the compaction testing of the trench to make sure that they have a nice tight trench so the street doesn't fail. For a little under $20,000, they've got V&A consulting engineers for corrosion to make sure that the pipelines and the fittings are protected from corrosion from the soil and so on. And that's almost a $32,000 contract. And then just environmental services, any CEQA. In fact, for this project, I just took to the county a notice of exemption to file that. And so there was some work there, environmental type work, that was about $6,600. So all told, the level of service that the district engineer has put in there for management of this project and the three sub-consultants total about $156,000. But he did mention that there were some unspent design funds particular to this project in the amount of $51,000. So it actually makes the request for construction management services $104,950. And then the 10% contingency, so that the total budget amendment that we're asking for with this task order is $115,450. One thing that's going to be new for us is we actually have a former Packport Consulting Group employee, Victor Fung. He retired from the consulting or district engineer's office not too long ago. We picked him up. He's a new employee to the district. He was hired as an operations coordinator, and part of his role is going to be providing the inspection services. Victor's done that for a number of years for PACPOR. He's actually done some inspection services for some of our capital projects in the past. And when this project gets going, Victor is going to be the district's eyes and ears out there for us as a district employee instead of as an employee of PACPOR Consulting Group. And that saves some of the cost that could have been a part of this as well, because we were going to be asking our district engineer to provide, you know, a scope of work that would have entailed construction inspection as well. So I think that's all I want to say, other than, again, if you wanted to, and I'm sure you did, starting on page 78, you see Exhibit A, which is the district engineer's proposal outlining the scope of work, and you see the cost, the number of hours, and then how he shows the different components to the design work, the initial contract in July 2020, the change in February 2021, this request for the $155,900, and then the unspent funds that he's taking off and coming up with the total request to the $104,000. So with that, what I'm going to do is I want to turn it over to Jubin. I think he wanted to make a few comments, and then after that, we'll open up to any questions the board members may have. Jubin?
Yeah, thanks, Rena. I just wanted to explain something that Rena touched on. The staffing of this project mimics exactly how we've successfully, and I'm encompassing the district and the district engineer's office, have staffed construction projects in the past. Basically, it's a full-time inspector in the field, plus a quarter person to a half person augmenting that inspector, right? So it's a 1.5 person job, 1 1/4 to 1.5 person job. And so the great thing is that Victor retired from us, joined Mid-Pen, so that one full-time person that's out there inspecting is not going to be a consultant. It's going to be a full-time employee of Mid-Peninsula Water District. So that takes that element out. The inspector goes out. The proposal before you is purely for that half person, quarter to half person time to augment the inspector, help that inspector out, and do all the things that are listed in the proposal. So these jobs have been staffed very successfully over the last 10 years with 1 1/4 to 1.5 person, depending on how complicated and how much the contractor really gets into. You know, if it's a hard contractor to work with, there's more time for management. It is a time and material contract, just like all of our contracts are. So if we end up not spending that time on this project, we end up not billing you. And so the other thing I wanted to touch on, which I think was a question that came in with Director Schmidt, which is a really good question, was what is that savings that came in from design? Explain that further, which is a really good question. This question came up when a proposal from another consulting firm that we hired, the district hired a couple of months ago, I think 3 months ago, it was Mott McDonald. They came in with a proposal. They're a much bigger firm. And the question was, how are design fees or construction management fees calculated? So the district knows roughly, is this in the ballpark of where we should be? And so when we put together our design proposal initially, we look at it at a bunch of different ways. And really, we have such a good history with the district. We have a pretty good idea how much it's going to cost to design something with the streets, with the utilities, with the coordination required. So we put together a contract, and it's time and material, or a proposal, I'm sorry, that is time and material. And most of the time we're within, 10%, 5%. If we go over, we come to you and explain to you, why we went over. But most of the time we're a little bit under, and then that gets rolled into the CM or construction management. In this case, a bunch of stars aligned, to be quite honest. We thought we were going to have a bunch of other utilities out in the street that were going to be in conflict. And then when we got into the design, it ended up being that those utilities were not in conflict, which is great. The design went a lot smoother than what we thought, which also meant that we didn't have to go out there and pothole. So pothole is the physical operation of going out and digging a little hole in the street to see if that utility is where it is, right? Because everything's on a map. But if AT&T or PG&E mark a gas line in the street and it's close to where we're going to put the water main or we're crossing it, we go out there and pothole it during design. So we go out and actually physically locate it. We dig the ground down and see, yep, there's where the gas line is. In this case, we once all the information came in, that didn't have to occur. So this doesn't happen very often, but to be quite honest, that all these things kind of align, but in this case they did. And again, because our contract is time and material, we didn't spend the time on this, which meant that there's a savings of about $51,000 on the design side. So I wanted to kind of explain that because we try our best during the proposal to estimate and put a fair proposal in of the hours that we think it's going to take. We don't highball it, we don't lowball it. You know, we're your district engineers, and so we put our best estimate in. And if for some reason we're under those hours, you see the savings. If for some reason we're over, we come to you and explain to you, hey, these are the circumstances. We thought this and this occurred. So we respectfully ask for a few more hours for the design. So that's sort of the history of it all. I hope I explained the question, Director Schmidt, that you had sent earlier to Rena, and how we come up with the hours for the construction management. So this is about a third of a full-time person. So we split the difference between a quarter and a half. We go with a third, assuming, you know, things will line up. So thank you.
Are there any questions of the board members of the staff report or the request?
Brian has his hand up.
Thanks, and thanks, Juben. That is helpful. It seems like if it's unusual, then it's just unusual. Kind of strange that the one that the board picked up on was or at least I was wondering why it costs so much to replace a pipe with a pipe. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. But that's what it seemed like. And I have to be glad when things end up being cheaper than you expect. It's obviously good news. The budget in this case did not operate as a constraint on the contractor. It was other things that did. And I think that's one thing a good budget estimate could do, is operate as a constraint. And if they weren't honest and padded their expenses, it might be a little bit harder to figure out if they had done that. So it's just something I guess I'd like to see us watch. I don't know, and maybe if there's more examples, and maybe I think you'd said back when we discussed this several months ago that there was pretty much a straight 15% allocation cost was to design. I don't know if there's sometimes when we might want to deviate from that if we think a project is simpler than might otherwise be the case. So other than that, this sounds great, fine, and I'm happy to, pending other comments, I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Brian. Louis?
Yes, thank you. Rena, the field inspection, we were doing those using our own employees for a number of years. So now we're not doing that because we have Victor. Is that what happened here?
Well, we had, if you recall right, Louis, that we had Mike Anderson, who's a supervisor, do some inspections out in the field on our projects. And we also had Rick Bissio, a former employee who retired a few years ago. Those two people had the right kind of skill set to go out there and be a field inspector. It has to be a certain type person. You just don't want to put anybody out there. They need to understand how things are constructed. They also need to understand the district's construction standards and so on. And they have to have the right kind of demeanor. And so Rick has retired. Michael has been busy, and I've had conversations with Tammy that it just did not seem like it was going to be a good thing to put Michael in a position again right now at this point in time to do inspection work as well as being a field supervisor of some of the field operations. And so when we heard that Victor Fung was retiring from PAC4 Engineering, we thought it might not be a bad idea to make him an offer to see him. He'd be a good fit with us. He knows our water system very well. He was the design engineer for the DeKoven tank site, among other water pipeline projects, and he has done some inspection work for us too. But you know, since I've been here, it's either been our own staff or we've hired outside consultants, similar to the El Camino Real project. That was work that was done by a company called TRC doing the construction management and construction inspection. So this one is, again, another employee, but we've got other ideals and ideas on how we can use Victor's experience and leverage it to deliver not only capital projects, but also provide some technical expertise into the district operations.
And it requires full-time work, Louis, meaning the inspector can't leave the job.
Yeah.
Well, with all the new hires and the retirements, we can't afford to have Michael out there full-time, not being able to leave the job. He's responsible for the crews and the training, as is Brent, and we just cannot afford to do without them. So what happens a lot of times during that time is that there are issues that come up and we've got to try to find replacements, or Michael has to be off, and that's just not happen. It can't happen right now. And then O&M gets pushed off. The good thing about Vic is that Vic is going to be able to train, meaning that he's going to be able to see that as we bring people in and we get them trained and they become more knowledgeable about the system, he has those skill sets to be able to train somebody else to do this kind of work. And we see that as a plus for the staff, that there's opportunities there to learn new skill sets and to be more responsible and to have these higher level duties. So there's a couple of pluses going on with that recruitment. So that's the reason why we just can't keep relying on the supervisors for everything. They've got some job duties now with the new hires and the changing faces.
Yeah, understood. I've seen enough, underground piping being laid, and I see the public works inspector there all the time, and they don't move because things happen when people are not watching. No, that I understood, but I also was under the impression that having our own people inspecting was working extremely well. But if we cannot afford them to be out there all the time, then obviously, we have to take care of that as well. But Tammy, and this is to you, when I see a contract like this, with C2R Engineering, and we saw, the other contractors that bid on this job, and C2R came out looking the best for us. That was not the total cost, though, and I want to be shown at that time that there is construction management cost addition to this. This is not the whole story. And when we approve C2R, in my mind, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, okay, so we'll have construction inspection, which we could do in-house. Okay, I know where I'm at. But I am off big time,
Yeah. So
by
your point,
$156,000 if it wasn't for the 51,000 savings.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money.
You're bringing up a good point. In fact, Jubin and Rena and I meet weekly, okay, because there's enough work going on. And besides capital projects, we have a lot of other system issues that we deal with. But I pulled up on the screen just for an example, Hastings Drive. And the reason why Rena attaches these to a staff report. If you'll see down here in the project budget, and these were in 2020 numbers, and I know you'll recall when you approved the comprehensive system analysis and the CIP, you can see this line item here, this planning and design, I've got the arrow on it, of $80,000. Okay, that's where the construction management comes in. And then you'll see that he actually has construction inspected. And I'm just talking about Hastings. Remember, this is a blend of a few projects, but the Hastings Drive improvements, he's got $35,000. That was his projected estimate when he did this. Now, what you're saying is what I was talking to the two of them about. Look, can we, when we do the construction project, have in the fiscal impact section this type of stuff in the fiscal impact so that the board sees, okay, you're not finished yet. Yeah, you're going to give this project for whatever it was, $2.5 million or $1.5 million, but we're going to come back to you with these other functions. And here's where we estimated them in each one of these projects. So they have been there for full transparency, there's no doubt, but I see where you're going. And I had the same issues. Look, it's just that when the board approves this project, they don't know that there's going to be more expenses. What more are we going to expend on this project? So they got it. And they said, okay, we get where you're going on that. And I think we can move forward with, maybe a little bit better description in the fiscal impact section in the future. But I just wanted to give it, so there
Correct.
it is.
No,
for
no,
18.
I appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
just, I don't want to belabor this, but the other thing is that as a director, if I'm looking at a quote and a bid by a contractor, C2 or whoever it is, and I know that it's a competitive bid. I know that I probably, if I keep on looking for other, I'm not going to get any better, or maybe if I do, it's going to be within the ballpark because it's competitive. But then I get to the management when I have a figure of $156,000, I go like, okay, why can't I be competitive with that too? It's a lot of money. So I just like it, to be a little sharper. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jubin, I saw that $50,000 design number leftovers, and I thought, where would that have come from? And I had guessed it was probably the utilities. They don't often work that way, but it's nice to see it happen. This, estimate is for construction management and design support during construction, essentially assuming that things work reasonably well. So as it should work well, as long as we don't have something that looks like the Notre Dame project where all of a sudden everything went wrong, and we ended up having some additional expenses. That's still a potential if there's conflicted or wrong depths on some of the stuff, that type of thing.
Potentially, but
Yeah.
I hope that we can mimic the other 10 years worth of projects that we've done for the district, which we've averaged about 2.5% to 3% change order. So that's the hope. And the construction support and management proposal that's before you includes a lot of the sub-consultants that provide, compaction testing, corrosion engineering. And so it's not necessarily just our time supporting the inspector. It includes the other disciplines that have to go into actually physically constructing the pipeline. And so this is the construction management portion. The inspector, the full-time inspector out there, is a full-time employee of Mid-Peninsula Water District. So it's not Michael doing it, it's Victor, but he is a employee of Mid-Pen. So that's
right.
The portion.
Yeah, so we are not paying consultant rates on him. We're paying wages and benefits and overhead on him. So it may be a slight cost savings in that regard, which is appreciated by having an employee do it. But unless,
but to your point, Kirk, is things could still happen.
Oh yes.
So first of all, that's why we have the contingency number one, and that it may or may not be enough. Hopefully, it will be more than enough. But the general manager put up Hastings, and Hastings is not going to be a walk in the park because it's pretty steep.
That
it's pretty difficult.
It's rocky. It's rocky, that underground. And so we do the best we can, and we try to be conservative, right? Because if we came here and said, oh, we know it's got shale, we know it's got rock, and now we think, if we really truly believed we needed more than 10%, we would justify that and say, look, here's because we've got this experience or whatever. But we do really, and I think PAC board does a good job with this. They do as best possible, right? And you don't see this often where there's a credit. Okay. I mean, we do. Rena has to view those sheets and the time and materials for all the engineers as capital project managers. So I know his eyes go cross, but it's rare that you see, this. But again, he was, honest in the fact that they projected it, knowing that that could be a possibility, and they didn't find those things underground that we so often find here.
Well, the good thing is that Hastings, and I know Rena knows this, we've been up there quite a few times, so we should be pretty familiar with what's going on there, because it's not the first time that we had main blows and some services there. Because I've seen Hastings coming up quite a few times.
It's a problem. It's a problem child, an area for us. And so the service connections are as well, because many of them are dual services, and they're just impossible to replace a single because of all the rocky terrain underground. And so that's why we had to pull this out. I mean, Rena and Zubin were correct. We just felt like it didn't belong here, and that we can try to get contractor maybe a better submittals or bids in if they just say, hey, look, this is what you're going to be doing, you're just going to be focused on the service.
Correct. Hastings, most of it is townhouses of groups of threes, so yeah. All right, thank you.
So let's see. So we have to approve the resolution. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'm prepared to move resolution 2022-08.
Second.
Okay, Vice President Vella,
Yes.
Director Schmidt, Director Jordan,
Yes.
President Wheeler.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, guys. And let's see, we're going to move on to return to in-person board meetings. And you heard Julie's report earlier. So this is for the board's discussion, and President Wheeler is going to lead it.
Well, it sounds like we're going to end up with this being a month-to-month type of thing in terms of whether or not the emergency, declared emergency continues. And at that point in time, we will be left with having to go back to in person. And so staff is going to work out what their best plan is going to be for that. And we'll see what happens.
I'm hoping that Rena and Brent, they're working together on this. I'm hoping maybe he has an update next month. We've been busy transferring all of our devices and our electronic devices and everything over to the CalNet system, so that we're under the first responder system now under Verizon. And so he's been really busy with that. The two of them have. And so I think they've got some good ideas, and we're just going to try to get that put together and hopefully be able to report that out. And we're staying in touch with Julie as well.
Okay, anybody have any comments on it?
Yep, I do.
Yes, Louis.
All right, thank you. So the next meeting would be on the 28th.
Correct.
Correct. Of April. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm even going to be in town so to me, from my standpoint only, having it virtual will be better. It will be better for me to participate. If we do it in person, I know I think I'm gonna be traveling back that day. So it will be very difficult for me to make it in person. And the other thing that I wanted to add to what Kirk was saying earlier is that the BAUSCA has also decided to, at least for next time, for the next 2 months, to have it virtual meetings as well. So for what it's worth. We won't be the only one. And as Julie said earlier, as long as the emergency is not lifted, I guess we could still do that. However, I know that there are agencies who are beginning to start meeting in person as well, so I don't think this is going to be something that's going to be done everybody at the same time, but people will kind of ease their way into it. So, but for April, I know that on that day I'm going to be traveling back, so it's going to be hard for me for sure. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah, so I just want to concur with you, Kirk, that I think it is kind of a month-to-month thing, depending on the emergency order. And in my meeting with Tammy yesterday, staff concurrently is preparing for us to go back in person when and if the emergency order is lifted. But I think based on our conversation we had last meeting, that we're all comfortable staying virtual until we kind of have to. And it also gives staff more time to prepare for us to be back in person and still have the ability for people to watch virtually.
Brian?
Month by month sounds fine to me. Virtual next month sounds fine. We'll play it by ear.
Sounds good. Okay. Another agenda item down. We can move on to 7F.
And that's Rena.
Yeah, drought time. So let's see what's going on. Even though this is somewhat dated now, it's just information from the first part of March. But as you know, I would typically like to show what's going on in the state and the U.S. in the form of this drought map. And what I just kind of wanted to point out here is that the table on the right side talks about the different percentages of the state's area that's in different stages of drought. The current, which is that top row we're at, compared to a year ago, which is that bottom row. So you can see the difference. A year ago, the moderate drought area of California consumed about 91% of the state. This year, it's the entire state's considered to be in a moderate drought. The severe drought, that orange area, a year ago was about 57%. This year, it's 87%. So that's a 30% increase in land area that's considered to be in a severe drought. And then the extreme drought, compared to last year, it's not quite as bad. It'll be interesting to see. And I think when we continue, talking about this, I think it was probably in May or June, we started to share this information at the board's request. And I'm going to pull up some of those California maps and share them so we can kind of compare, a year later and what the drought looked like in 2021 in California compared to 2022. It's going to be interesting, but it's not a pretty picture. It's not a pretty picture. And if you go to the next slide, Tammy, the U.S. Drought Monitor, you can see how it looks across the United States. And look at poor Oklahoma in terms of being in an extreme drought. It looks like it's about 3/4 of the state is in extreme drought. Same thing with up there in Montana. It's just not looking good. The next slide is just some rain information. I found this, and I shared this with the board at the beginning of the calendar year this year, just to kind of point out what those two rain events that we had in October and December, late December, did for the state of California. So if you take a look at the data in that first column, and they track rain from July 1 through June 30th of a cycle. And so through the end of calendar year 2021, you can see that those two rain events actually did quite a number to the green column there, the percentage normal column. Every place in California was at least 100%. Most of it was, 150 to 200% of normal, meaning we got twice as much rain that we would normally get in that period of time. And then of course we know that beginning in January and actually through March here so far, it's been pretty dry. And that's what that middle set of data is reflecting, that we haven't had much rain, showing what we'd had to date and what's normal for the different parts of the state. So if you take a look at that first row, San Francisco downtown, they had 17 inches of rain. Normally they have about 17.6 inches of rain. So they're pretty much at normal. But if you compare what has fallen in that last columns over there, what has fallen through that first part of March, at 17 inches, compared to what to normally get in downtown San Francisco, about 23 inches. You can see it pretty much a little bit below normal now. You know, we're falling, kind of slipping behind the scenes. And what I did with the yellow and the green there is, depending on the column of information. So you see that the far right column, it says it's 67% of the year. So if it was highlighted in yellow, that meant that the percent normal was below that 67%. So you can see that San Jose in that far right column, they're at 49% of normal. So that's why I just kind of highlight, just to kind of give you an idea what's going on. It's just different all over the state. And in the Bay Area, it seems like Sacramento, San Jose just has not received anywhere near as much rain as other parts of the peninsula. And I'm not sure if that's normal. Some of you have probably a lot more experience with the Bay Area weather than I do. But I just thought the precipitation information is just really interesting because we really got slammed good before the end of calendar year 2021. But since then, it's just been pretty dry. So Tammy, what's the next slide talking about? It's talking about rain forecast. And this is information that the SFPUC shares with the water managers at the meeting. And so they just get this probably from NOAA or somebody like that at the federal level. And it just kind of shows what the precipitation could be like in 2 different periods of time over the next month. This happens to be from late February to the first part of March, and then from that first part of March to the middle of March. And then these are just bar graphs that, again, the SFPUC shares with us, upcountry being up in the Sierra Nevadas, not even really Hetch Hetchy per se, but just up there in they call it the upcountry. And again, what the bars reflect is what we saw in October and December. We had lots and lots of rain. And since then, it's just been pretty dry. You can see in January and February for water year 2022, the most they got was in February of 0.4 of an inch, just not much. And that's way below normal, the 6 inches, which is normal. Next slide, Tammy. So what does that mean for Hetch Hetchy? Earlier in the year, at the end of December, with the rain events, we were well ahead of that black median line, which is a 30-year median rain number for the Hetch Hetchy area. And you can see with the dryness that we've had the last couple months, the actual rain in Hetch Hetchy is actually now fallen below that 30-year median line. So just indicating that, and it's not a good sign. We're not getting a lot of rain up there in Hetch Hetchy and a lot of snow, and we've fallen below. Not as bad as 2021, definitely not as bad as 1977, but below the 30-year trend. Next slide, Tammy. And so here's the Bay Area precipitation stations at the regional water system, the folks at SFPUC monitor. Very similar to the upcountry, a lot of rain in October and December, and then definitely not so much, and well below the normal for the first few months of calendar year 2022. Next slide. And so here's a telling sign for all of us. We all rely on the storage of water to provide during the hot months and of the year. And so this happens to be a slide from the Department of Water Resources showing a lot of the major reservoirs in California where they're at. And what's important to see here is that green horizontal line in each one of these bar graphs. That green line represents the historical average for this particular time of year for that particular reservoir. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see the Shasta Reservoir. That's a 4.5 million acre foot reservoir. And right now it's at 37% of capacity, and it's at 51% of historical average for this time of year. They're well below average. It's not a good sign. Last month, I mentioned that I'd heard from the SFPUC staff that Shasta is the reservoir that the federal government really monitors closely to kind of give them an idea of how much water is going to be available for federal contractors who use water south of Shasta Reservoir. And the same thing with Oroville. Oroville is the reservoir that the state of California kind of uses as its guide as to what the water year is going to look like for state contractors. And again, that reservoir, it's at 73% of historical average right now, below where it typically is. So it's not a good sign. And on the far right, you see the Dom Pedro. It's at 80% of historical. It's a little bit better. than others, but still we're just low. And so it's going to be a tough year. We were just talking about the drought, and if and when we think that the governor or the state might call for a drought, and what we're hearing is that they may not call for a drought until maybe the fall. And if you remember last fall, some of these reservoirs were really low. And we're thinking that if the governor does call for water conservation measures for everybody in the fall, you can only imagine what these reservoir levels might look like by then, especially if there's not a lot of snow melt to fill them back up. Next slide, Tammy. The regional water system storage conditions through February. What's interesting to point out here is that far right-hand column, the normal percentage of maximum storage. The SFPUC took down the tunnel coming out of the Hetch Hetchy system for maintenance beginning the 1st of January, I think it's January 4th, and didn't put it back into service until March 8th. So we've been just receiving water from the local reservoirs and the local water treatment plants here. And that's why the Hetch Hetchy number there, that 86.1% is so high. Typically, they're at about 65% of capacity, and that's because they're anticipating, a runoff from snow melt to fill it up. And so we're actually putting more water into Hetch Hetchy because the tunnel was not being used; it was under maintenance. I thought that was interesting. But overall, for the overall system, there's about 74% of the maximum storage capacity that's stored behind the Tuolumne system reservoirs and water bank and the local Bay Area reservoir system. Next slide, Tammy. The total deliveries into the entire regional water system in the terms of million gallons per day. And so the gold line is calendar year 19. The purple line is calendar year 20. And that one, you can actually see the spike in March when COVID hit. There was a really huge demand on water resources then, and it kind of tapered off as things kind of got to normal. And then you can see where we are right now in calendar year 2022, the green line. There was that warm period that we had in February where the weather was really nice. We had no rain, and there was a pretty good demand on the system. I mean, mimicking what we saw in actually 2020, and definitely higher than what we normally see, in comparing it with 2015 and or with 2019. Things have kind of fallen off a little bit. We're just kind of wondering if maybe some drought messaging by the SFPUC, by folks like the Mid-Peninsula Water District or so on, it is making people think about conserving water. But there was a slight dip in demand, probably about 10 to 12 million gallons per day over the last couple of weeks. Tammy, next slide. And then here's our use for the month of February. Our water use went up when in 2022 February when compared to February 2021 by about 8.3%. We used 77,800 units of water in 2022 compared to 71,800 units of water in February 2021. Though our per capita number didn't look too bad at 55.1 gallons per day per person on the residential side. The next slide, Tammy. This is this cumulative slide that I've just kind of been playing with. As you recall, we mentioned that the SFPUC has given all of their wholesale customers a water budget. And so for our water budget in January, it was 75,000 units of water. In February, shorter month, it was 72,000 units of water. So combined total, 147,000 units of water. We actually pulled from the system 154,785 units of water. We actually pulled more water than we were kind of budgeted, but it's a soft budget because again, it's a voluntary type thing. But you never know if there could be something mandatory. So we're just going to keep tracking this and showing this. And it's actually, we're talking with John. This is this piece of information that we're talking about putting on our website as part of our conservation efforts to kind of show people how we're doing in terms of our water budget and how we're doing in terms of conserving water and how that looks when we compare it to, water use maybe over the last 5 years, which is that blue line. Tammy, next slide. Thanks. And then the drought tracker, this is something the SFPUC staff has put together, and they're showing the period of July 2021 through February 2022. on the top, and then the period of January 2022 through the end of February 2022. Let's focus on the bottom one because that's the most recent one. So what they're saying that the amount of reduction when you compare that month this year to last year was actually a 13% reduction for San Francisco customers, and actually the wholesale customers went up by almost 2%. And actually, again, one of the previous slides I showed, our water use in the community here in the district was up 8.3%. So the warm weather, the lack of rain caused people to go out there and create more demand on the system, and weren't conserving water, but using a little bit more. Next slide, Tammy. And so here's the snow, the upcountry snow in the Hetch Hetchy system for the regional water system. And again, you can see the red line showing where we're at, and it was really nice in December, and is actually ahead of schedule compared to the last heavy snowpack that they posted, which is 2017. But again, with the dry weather that we had beginning in January, now the snow has pretty much not fallen there, and we actually now are below that 30-year median, that black line for the period of time, and we're kind of tracking along with what we saw last year in 2021, which wasn't very good, but definitely better than the 2015 snowfall. So yeah, the snow picture doesn't look that great. And then the Tuolumne River water available to the system, much better than the last couple of years, but it's pretty much the same over the last few months. About 127,000 acre feet has been made available to the regional water system. In order to fill the entire system, including the water bank, it'd be nice to have about 598,000 acre feet. It doesn't look like we're going to get that. I think we're probably going to stay flat at that 127,000 acre feet. Are there any questions or comments about the information? Not a pretty picture.
Brian has a comment, question.
Thanks. This is always very informative. As always, we can't cover last month, and as always for the last couple months, we know the last month was dry. March might not have been as bad as January and February, but it was still dry. So that's not good, and there's nothing we can do about that. Regarding our own usage, which we can do something about, the minutes talked about how the possibility of approaching the city and the school district, a turf replacement, that staff was going to get in touch with them. I'm wondering if next month we can get some type of update, even if it's just reached out.
Yeah, and I'll give an update during my GM report since I met with the
Great.
city manager on Monday. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Louis?
Yeah, it was interesting, Rena. Thank you so much for showing us these graphs. We go over these also at the BOSCA meeting, so there's no need for me to repeat this. But it was interesting to see that the rain precipitation in the Bay Area almost was identical to the snowfalls in the upcountry.
Yeah.
It's amazing because usually they're not the same. I mean, because over up in the high country, it's like they have their own weather and it's their own systems, and sometimes things happen up there and that we don't even know about. But the two graphs were almost identical, if you look at them. So that was kind of interesting. Rena, did anybody talk about the foreseeable near future? We're going to have some precipitation. Was that something that people were excited about, or is something that's going to be negligible?
I'm not hearing anything about any large precipitation events. I mean, I'm just looking at the weather. I see that there's a chance of rain next week, but I'm not hearing that it's going to be, something similar to what we saw in October and December.
No, not that, but hopefully it will be enough to at least make some corrections to where we need to be.
We're just so far behind. We're so far behind in terms of the storage, the state reservoir storage, graph there. to try and make that up, it would take, a monumental, rain and snow events to kind of catch up there. And it actually, it'd probably take a few years of at least normal, type weather, or maybe slightly above normal to catch up. But I think with what we've had so far, that what we're going to see is these reservoir levels just continue to shrink down. And that's what's going to trigger the state, to call for mandatory water conservation, is just the reservoir levels falling down.
Correct. Yeah. You're correct.
And the one thing that the San Francisco PUC is keeping an eye on, Louis, which is a good point you're making, are the curtailments. What type of curtailments are going to be placed upon the systems so that when that snowpack starts melting, how much of it are we going to get to keep in our system?
That's a good point.
How much are we going to get to store, and how much is going to have to be let go of, because we don't have control over that either. But that's what they're primarily interested in, managing and monitoring, right? Is just what are those impacts going to potentially be on the regional water system?
Correct. That is going to be interesting because I think I saw it yesterday on TV, because they were kind of advertising that if anybody wants to reserve spots at Yosemite, the applications opened yesterday, and they showed a picture of the Yosemite Valley, and I was hoping that I could see those water flows going like crazy. I mean, the snow must be melting, but they were not that full, and they were not that big. And I go like, oh my God, already? They're doing so. There's not going to be much left in the summer. So yeah, you're right.
Okay. Thank you, Rena. We have Bosca update is next on the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Kirk. Thank you. We met last Thursday, the 17th, on St. Patrick's Day. We met virtually, and one of the actions that we took was we voted on a resolution declaring that the board meetings will continue to be held via teleconference. So I know that for the next meeting is going to be teleconference for sure, and then we'll see after that. We also received a budget status report. This was for information, basically to see where we're at with the expenditures and the income. And the incomes, as you all know, with BOSCA, it's the allocations that we have for each agency. And then we talked about an agreement of with Outfront Media, which is a company that advertises on these digital billboards that we have up and down, the freeways, and there's going to be some drought messaging campaign, and we're going to be using those digital billboards so that we can hopefully get the attention of the maximum people possible. We have thousands of cars driving by them every day, and with tens of thousands of people commuting. And hopefully the one thing that Brian mentioned earlier that we have control over is, unfortunately, we cannot make it rain when we want to, but we can conserve that is we have control over if we have a good educational campaign. And we're hoping that through BOSCA's effort and all the agencies will have a better campaign. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is utilizing these digital billboards. So they're going to give us space and time, to do that. And the other thing that I want to mention was we discussed the preliminary fiscal year plan and the operational budget. So that took a long time talking about that, but those were the main things that we talked about at the meeting. There were the other regular stuff that we talk about, like the report from the SFPUC, and we had comments from people that in attendance, that about the Bay Delta plan and the voluntary plan that's still coming up. You know, we got a lot of comments from different people, Sierra Clubs, the Tuolumne River Trust, and all those people. So those, Tammy, I don't know if you want to add to this.
Yes, yes, thank you. So, water supply is always the number one issue, and Rena thankfully goes through that with this presentation that he makes. And then the other big item that we talked about on March 3rd was the Tier 2 allocation plan, and we were to designate a point person, and that point person for Mid-Penn Water District is Rena Ramirez. Since he'll be here longer, these negotiations, just like the water supply agreement amendments, are probably going to take a couple of years. Remember, there's 26 agencies vying for as much water as they can get when Tier 2 is called, or when that's leveraged against us. And then just the other thing was keeping up with the work plan or the budget items that Lewis referred to, and ensuring that we're understanding, what kind of ideas and plans are in place for next fiscal year for Bosco. And Rena, anything else that you can remember that stands out? It was a relatively shorter meeting this month for us.
No, I think you guys covered the major topics. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
Very good. Thank you.
Any questions regarding Bosco? Okay. Then we can move on to management reports.
Okay, thank you. So you have my written report, and what I just want to point out before I report on a few other items here that were not included at the time of publication, just these dates. Okay, so for the general manager recruitment, what can be publicized is thus far through the initial closing date yesterday. It's still open. It was just the initial deadline for reviews. There were 25 applicants for the general manager position, but these dates are important. And for the most, I've already received, either you've received the appointment and there are going to be closed sessions. And so I have heard from the majority of you or gotten that you received it. And this paragraph here on April 28th, I have learned in discussions with CPS HR Consulting, just for the ad hoc committee, which unfortunately Matt wasn't able to make it here, but for Matt and Kirk, and that is, it's not going to be more than 60 to 90 minutes that day on the 28th. So that date is still good as long as everything else reaches. Right now, the consultant is vetting and going through and making sure the minimum qualifications are met. So just wanted to put these dates out in front of you. You'll see them again here in the 3-month look ahead, just so that it's all clean. And then I attached the board finance committee because they're going to be very busy this year. Very busy. There's a lot of items before the board finance committee this year. One of them being this paragraph I mentioned at the top of page 104. And that is, thank you, because it was a lot of hard work to vet the two candidates, the two candidate CPA firms for the professional accounting services and the district treasurer appointment. So the committee has now advanced based on staff working with them, the firm that was recommended by the former district treasurer, Jeff Ira, and that would be Siobhan and Associates, and they are in San Jose. So you will see that on your board agenda packet. The committee asked the staff work with them on a scope of services, and we're hoping to get that completed before next month. We actually have a virtual meeting scheduled with them next week. And then I attached the committee's assignments here. So if you'll just bear with me, let me add a few more items. I met with Afshin Asqui on Monday for our meeting. He's the city manager for Belmont. We talked about many things, and one of them, the things that came out were, just very collegial about what we're working on, what's coming up in the city, what's coming up with with our district. And a couple of things kind of shook out, as before we ended the meeting was, is there this need for this governing body meeting? And at this time, we kind of think there's a couple of alternatives to that, because we are all very busy and it is so challenging to try to get everybody together for a meeting. One of them is the city council wants to acknowledge the Mid-Peninsula Water District during in recognition of Water Awareness Month next month. And they want to do this on April 12th at their city council meeting. It would be at the beginning of the meeting, and they intend to return to in-person meetings next month. So as soon as I get the information, which Afshin promised that he would send, I will let you know that, because they may do a hybrid. He's still checking that out, and I'll let you know as soon as that. So April 12th, the city of Belmont intends to recognize the district and acknowledge in acknowledgement of Water Awareness Month, which is in May. The other thing that we talked about was having the district do another drought report to the city council in June. Okay, so we just thought those two activities are keeping us busy. Finally, to address Director Smith's issue about the turf replacement, Afshin and I did talk about that. I wasn't aware that the city of Belmont has like a joint use agreement for the fields at Ralston Middle School. And they have responsibility to pay half the water. They have responsibility to pay for half the maintenance of the fields. And they're in very active discussions with neighborhood groups as well as the school district on replacing that turf with a more earth-friendly artificial turf. I want to say it was either coconut, bamboo, something like that. So I said that we would consider working with them in concert with, some type of proposal where we could find a way to be involved. Right now, any of the Bosque Long Begone rebate programs don't include artificial turf, I'm sorry. But I just want to be able to be a little more open-minded in this project, just because they are considering other sources of artificial turf. And because it is a good partnership, especially after you just heard all the drought reporting. And I will definitely have staff be working in coordination with the city on getting this accomplished. So Afshin and I are both supportive of this as the leaders of our organizations. And I expressed that the board was interested in as well. So stay tuned, more to come. I just see some value here, so it'll depend on what the ultimate cost will be and how we can see the district fitting in to that project. I sent you information with regard to the Department of Water Resources grant for our Peninsula groundwater well program. And while our project, neither the DeKoven tanks or our groundwater potential drought supply well did not get selected or awarded, the North Coast County Water District, we are very happy to report, did get their project fully funded at $6.6 million. So while the efforts certainly did not go unnoticed, we're happy that our partner water supplier on the peninsula was awarded their project. So I just wanted to report that out. And then, unless there's any questions, I just want to remind Rena that to report on the progress, that's a project for potable reuse that San Francisco is leading. And I'll wait till his report for that to happen, but I'm open for questions. That's all I had for my GM report.
Any questions on the GM report? Okay. Next is administrative services.
Okay, well, thank you. I only have a few items to just review, and one of them is the utility account arrearages program. Staff has gone ahead and credited the accounts. There were 21 accounts who still had delinquent bills, and so they were credited for a total of, I think it was like 35. I'm sorry, I've lost my notes. 34,000. 30. Hold on. Sorry.
It's like it's 35,749, Monique. Sound familiar?
I just don't see the total we paid.
It's 31,534.
Yeah.
And then we expect to return $3,173.62 to the state. And that's because some of those accounts were brought current. So at the time that we applied, there were 25 delinquent accounts. And we are currently justifying about $1,041 in administrative fees so that we are accountable to the state when we supply the refund. The other thing that we've done is we have gone ahead and notified all those people that still have balances that there is the LEWOP grant which will be released very soon, and they were provided with some information about it. And any account that was delinquent that received the credit was also offered a payment plan, which is part of the requirements for the grant money. So I also was asked to explain the delinquent accounts for you. So we had 343 reminder notices that went out on March 3rd. We had 30 48-hour notices that went out. Then we had 7 disconnection notices that went out. And of those 7, 2 customers paid in full. 1 customer still has a past due balance and has entered into a payment plan. 2 have payments in transit, and 2 accounts were disconnected for non-payment. So I think that is all that I have. And so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
And thank you, Monique and Misty, for putting this all together. We worked closely with other Peninsula agencies, particularly North Coast County Water District, and really appreciated their letter style to their customers. It was complicated to administer only because there were specific requirements, and that's why we included the spreadsheet for you on page 117, just so you could see the different types of accounts and how the money was applied. And I should have pulled this up for Monique. Sorry, Monique, about that, where it shows the total. And what Monique was referring to as these administrative costs, that's mine, Monique's, and Misty's time. And getting this administered, it is not much money, believe me. But it was limited to that. 5%, I think is what it was, very small amount. And then the refund, as Monique stated, is basically because between the time we applied and the arrearages at the time were $35,750 rounded, and people brought their accounts current. So, you know, obviously we were not going to pay and issue a credit on anybody's account. That was not a programmer, and that was a program violation. And so you can still see that there are balances due in this final column to the far right. And those people and those customers, unless they take advantage of the payment plan, we have a 30-day window after we did these letters and applied these credits, which happened a couple of weeks ago. The state requires a 30-day window to give these folks time to apply for a payment plan, and they got all that information in their packet. And if they don't, then they will start going through the shut-off process. Unless they apply with that LEWAP program, they will have to move through that process. They've been getting every opportunity and many chances, besides the fact that they've got some state funding to pay off their arrearages. So we wanted to show all of this information and be fully transparent. The program itself has been fully transparent. And we feel very fortunate. Like I said, our partner agency that we worked with, and I thank Adrian Carr as the general manager for meeting with Monique and Misty and I. They had $180,000 worth of arrearages, and they have they're the same size. They have about 8,000 connections like we do, and they're largely residential. And at the time of their payoff, they only had to pay off 120,000. So between the time they applied and they applied the payments, about 60,000 of their arrearages, their customers had brought current. So it was a good program. It was a lot of work, and I hope the customers are appreciative, because it definitely has still work for us to do to wind this thing down in the next couple of weeks, and then to make sure that we monitor and manage them in the future after these have been applied. So thank you, Monique, for sharing this information with the board and making it part of your report this month.
Louis, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick observations. Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Monique, for bringing this to us in details. I'm looking at that form that you have in the package where you talk about payment plan. When people go on a payment plan, I see that they sign it, so it's like a contract agreement.
Yes.
How they pick and choose how long?
So you can see in number 2, 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. You know, sometimes they'll say, I just need 4 months or whatever. We really try to work with them, and then they have to keep this payment in addition to their current balance current, right? That's part of this requirement. And
So
so
this will be for
most
the
of them do.
arrears only. For the
No,
arrears
no, no,
only.
we do this for regular customers too, Louis. If somebody calls and says they have a financial problem, or, oh my goodness, somebody died in the household or whatever, they've lost their job.
Correct.
This has always been in place for the district. We've just
Correct.
cleaned it up and made sure that these folks who have arrearages, which quite frankly, most of them know about our payment plan, to be honest with you. The majority of the customers on the list are chronic late payers. And so we still make sure that we're treating every customer fairly. So we will have some who are burdened by financial difficulties, and we offer them a payment plan with these same standards, hey, I just need a couple of months. Can we pay this off? And we'll offer that. I don't know what the total is right now. I'm sorry, I didn't have that number ready, like how many customers we have. I think the most we've ever had on a payment plan was about a dozen at one time, but I don't believe that's the case right now. We'll have that for you next month, if you don't mind. Monique, maybe you can ask the status of our payment plans and how many people are and all that good stuff. But if they don't pay, they start moving through the disconnect process, okay? Because they made a commitment with this agreement that they would stay current.
So if somebody has not paid and they have a balance of about, I don't know, I mean, $500, okay? And they're still using the water. So the water that they are using, they have to stay current. And then they go on a payment plan on the arrears if they don't want to, if they cannot, they're not in a position to pay it all.
Correct.
Back. So, okay. And then, who monitors that?
Misty and Rana Kata. Those two. In fact, I think that's Ron's responsibility. He's been fully trained on that now. So there's not a whole lot of people on it right now, but it is a constant, like, when the bills before they come out and they're reviewing where they're going out, the payment plans are one of their processes during that review process.
Yeah. And I know that, probably some people, they fall into some hardship and we have to be compassionate about that too. But there is also administrative cost associated with this, right?
It is something else to keep up with. One of the issues with going 60 days, remember back in that discussion, about how long, right? Remember that?
I do.
And,
yes.
one of the issues comes up, and that's why we have some of these arrearages. I think we should feel fortunate out of, 8,200 accounts that this is all we have, right? Yeah, especially when I hear my colleague in Northwest County Water District talk about $180,000. I don't know how many accounts that was, but that's a lot. So our customers, for the majority, they're just very good at paying their bills.
And one last thing, and I let this one go. These the people who fall into a hardship, they do have other recourses, right? I mean, we work with them, and then that's fine. But they do have other recourses where they can get assistance from the state, from the county, right?
Well, so the majority of the cases for water bills particularly are now this arrearages program, because most of these accounts did go in arrearages during COVID. There's no doubt, right? And then now there's going to be this low income, or this the LWOP program, or LWOP program. I don't know that there's specifically any grant programs anymore through the County of San Mateo. If they were at some time, they were very small, and there were just income requirements that they had to meet. And sometimes folks don't meet those limitations, right? So again, we can see a customer's history, and we know when they've been responsible and they've paid their bills. We know when they call in and they go, gosh, we've just fallen upon hard times, help us out. And we're going to do that. You're absolutely right. We're going to offer that to any customer.
Because what I was getting at is, and in every system and in every way you're going to turn, there's going to be the bad apples, and the bad apples going to ruin it for everybody else. But since we are talking about, everybody going through COVID and all of that, we also know that certain people who are supposed to be paying rent, not only for residential, but also for commercial and all that, they received assistance. They received plenty of assistance. They received more than deserved assistance, and they still never paid the rent. So, so I'm thinking, are these people just don't know where the priorities lie, and water is obviously
I mean,
a
it's a priority, right? I mean, you'll see this customer right here that I'm highlighting, this 11,656 is residential. You'll remember them. They were the ones that had the leak, right?
Mhm.
And we had to stay on top of them, and they just got $11,656.20 paid for by the state of California, our
Yeah.
tax dollars, right, of their
There you go.
balance.
There
And
you
they
go.
have $861. But the thing you all did as a board is you re-implemented our fees. And that's what helps to bring accounts current, okay? Because then the chronic late payers have to step up and get their accounts paid. And that's the responsible thing to do. I mean, it adds more fees to their accounts, but they come back and they have to bring their accounts current.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for the discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you, Monique.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that. We have the operations report.
Yeah, so yeah, let's focus right here, Tammy, on projects. The last item on the projects is about the PrEP project, the potable reuse exploration or exploratory project. That is an alternative water supply project that's the SFPUC is leading the charge, but you've got other agencies that are involved. You've got two sewer agencies, San Mateo City Sewer Agency, the Silicon Valley Clean Water Agency. They are the water provider, so to speak, of the potential for this potable reuse. Then we're a part of it, Redwood City, Cal Water in San Mateo, Cal Water in San Carlos, and Foster City and Bosque as well. So right now we are in phase 4, talking about phase 4, and we just got involved in the phase 4 part of this project. And what we've been talking about is a feasibility report. How feasible is this project to create potable reuse water? Where's it going to go? How's it going to get introduced to the system? And so for the last month or so, we've been talking about how we're going to share the cost of this particular project. So Tammy and I talked about this, and what we're going to do next month is bring a report to the board just to kind of let you know what this PrEP project is all about, what were the different phases that have been involved, where we got involved in it, and what some of the ideas are, you know, and the potential for the district to participate. How far does the district want to go? How far does the board want to maybe set a policy that they want to participate in this potable reuse project? Because right now, you know, we're at the very, very beginning of it all, right? Trying to figure out what is the feasibility of this. There is the water supply, it's wastewater, treating it, but now you're talking about building all this infrastructure, which also includes treatment capacity to treat the wastewater to the drinking water standards, and then putting that water into the system. It's going to be very expensive. So we want to give the board a taste of that, and hopefully get some policy direction on how far the board wants to get into this. We see it as an opportunity so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket, right? Right now, all of our water supply comes from the regional water system 100%. We don't have any groundwater supplies to augment, and we don't have any other water resources that we can draw from. This is one that's nearby. And so we see it as a potential alternative water supply to augment us and hopefully maybe, you know, prevent or make us a little more drought proof. So that's one particular project that's underway amongst many. And then on the next page, Tammy, I just always like to point out on the very top here, the underground service alerts, a location request. During the month of February, we had 349 service requests. That's quite a bit. We spent a lot of time. Like I said, it's one dedicated person doing that 8 hours a day. And sometimes, you know, they may have to have a little help from some other people. On the next page, I'm not going to make mention of it because I don't want to jinx it there, but you see system repairs. And then the last thing I'll point out is just that, you know, a lot of development activity, 70 development projects in different stages that we are working on right now. So busy out in the field. Anyways, that's my report. Any questions of the board members of what's in here? Be glad to try and answer.
Anyone have a question?
And I should report, just because Rena knows that we're regrouping, we're not regrouping, but we're about to hear the update from the capacity charge team, RDN, in the next week or two. So that will be going first to your finance committee, and it's been updated since the water shortage contingency plan and the urban water management plan were adopted. So for all this development, we're trying to get out now and get ahead of that and make sure that it has that feel for what's going to happen during a drought or to preempt a drought, what the capacity charges are going to be for the next fiscal year. Probably it'll probably take effect. That's the goal anyway.
Rena, did you make any progress with the El Camino Real construction project on settling the fees?
We are in the process of sending them a letter with a potential solution, what we think is a fair deal to try and close that project. I'll just say that right now. We're not through finalizing that letter, but our intent is to send the letter to Mitchell Engineering, the contractor, to try and make an offer, a settlement offer, to see if they want to talk about that.
Okay.
So a little progress, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. They have made a threat of litigation. So thank you for that brief report, Rena, and District Council should see it probably tomorrow or Monday. We think it's really good. And I just saw that Jubin this evening made his edits. So once we get the construction management company or inspection company, TRC, to review it, then it'll head that way, just because. But we think it's good to open up these discussions. We're definitely experienced at doing this. We've had this happen to us on Alameda de las Pulgas, and the project went so well. There's no reason to not attempt or to try to get out in front of it and be very professional and amenably settling it. So that's the goal. Thank you for asking about it though, Kurt.
Okay. So the last item would be the financials.
No, Jubin,
No.
if Jubin has his district engineer
Jubin.
report. Mhm.
Just really briefly, we have two projects right now that are on the books. One is a Harbor Boulevard water main project that goes from OCR to 101, and that project is on budget. And the description of what we did over the last month is there. The Hastings Vine project, as I've reported earlier, is scheduled to start construction in mid-April, and hopefully go smoothly for 90 days. So nothing else to report at this point.
I have been seeing them out potholing on Harbor Boulevard, on Harbor. So yeah.
Yeah, that one we did have to pothole. There's a lot of utilities out there. So, but that's in the budget, and it's all
Right.
That's accounted for.
Good. Financials.
And so this last report, thankfully, we have Al Labossiere on board, and he's on the phone, and he's been ever so patient for these 3 hours. And Al, since he's prepared this report, I'm very happy to report that these are through our financial management system, and he's cleaned up and updated all not cleaned up, I'm sorry, the finance committee would rather me use the word organized, better organized the salaries and wages, because we had to bring those up to date. And you'll see the year to date right now is roughly 67%, and our revenues from all sources are coming in at about 75%. And the largest reason is because of the sale of F Street right there in the miscellaneous non-operating, which the board is fully aware of. And the expenses are hovering around 59%, which is within that budget. You'll notice the bottom looks a little different because, part of the accounting and having a professional CPA on board and CFO is that the depreciation expense should come. It's a paper expense but you see it still here because the next thing that Al's been working on this week in preparation to work with us on the budget for the finance committee on April 13th is getting the capital projects now aligned and those budgets prepared. So you will see those next month, and they may look different, but you're going to we're going to just know that they're all reconciled. And the good thing about having Al on board, and the one thing that I always love that he's been telling me all week long working here is, Tammy, I go to the audit first. I'm going to the audit, and then I'm going to go look at your records, and I'm going to look at them, and I'm going to reconcile them and make sure that he's just worked very steadfastly, which is the proper way to do that. So thank you, Al. And if there was anything else you wanted to add to the financial report or something that I said, feel free to unmute yourself and do so. Otherwise, if there's questions, I'm glad you're here in case the board has them, that you can support some responses.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. I don't really have anything to add if there's any questions.
I don't see any. Oh, Louis?
Yeah, that, can you talk a little bit about that service coverage, please?
So the debt service coverage, and I'll let Al, if I misspeak, he can correct me, is for our debt financing. So the line items that are able to be included within there, the revenue sources versus the expenses, they are calculated, and it's very specific in order to show management and the board and lenders that we're exceeding our 1.3, which is what we promised to commit to in the debt financing for 2016 COPs. Did I do that okay, Al?
Yes, no, I would add just one thing. It's not in the actual column because that it doesn't necessarily show a true picture because with the way money comes in or whatnot, if it doesn't come in on an even flow, such things as property taxes and whatnot. So it's, you know, as long as it's budgeted and it's showing that you're operating within the budget, then you show that the debt service coverage is good over the 1.3, as Tammy said.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Lois.
Then, and that would go, because I'm looking at it under the column of approved budget.
Right. And what Al's saying is it is about the approved
Because
budget.
it's like a standalone thing, right?
Correct.
All right.
That's
Okay.
exactly
All right.
right.
Okay.
It
Okay.
used to show up like on every column, and the first thing Al said is, that's not accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not accurate.
Yeah.
You just want to know that when your board approved the budget, it met the debt service ratio, and you did, and we did. So it's just going to stay that way, right? It just looks like, you know, before you would see it under every column, and that wasn't accurate. That wasn't the way to do it.
All right. Okay.
So
That's it from me.
what does
Thank you.
the ratio actually apply to? It's the $1 million in debt service.
So we didn't mark
Yeah.
the actual line items, but what it's saying, oh, go ahead, Al. I'm sorry. It's so nice to have you.
Oh, I was just going to say if I always have trouble explaining formulas, but anyway, it's the operating income, which is your operating revenue less your operating expenditures with depreciation and any debt service added back in. That number divided by your debt service, and a good healthy number, you always want to be at least over 1, because 1 shows you can pay it. Anything above that is how comfortably you can pay your debt service.
Right.
As far as that goes, from your operations, meaning you don't have to find it somewhere else.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah, I was just trying to see if there was actually a number in there that we were taking the ratio from, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's a computation, as you said. You have to again back out some of the numbers and then do some division. All the
Right.
numbers to do it are there, but right, it's not one single number.
Okay.
But for us as an indicator, 1 is mathematically tells us that it's something that is that we should be comfortable with. Anything above 1 gives us more comfort. Why did you say 1.3 then?
Because 1.3 is
Well-
required, it's required in our debt service documents. That we committed there that we would be at that or above that based on historical
Okay,
revenues and expenses.
All right.
So that's our
Oh.
commitment we made at the time we
All
borrowed the money.
all right.
We've never
Okay.
had a problem meeting it, just so you know. That's why it's always been there. But now I know it's getting calculated correctly and it's never been a problem since we
Yeah,
borrowed the money.
but that number, obviously, it's a result of a mathematical formula.
It is.
So
it is.
basically, whatever you put into that mathematical formula, you could change that number if you include or you don't include certain numbers,
That's
right?
right. That's
So
exactly
it's just
right.
like, we can make numbers look whichever way we want.
Mhm.
So then my question would be, is there a definite line item that needs to be into the formula, into that
Yes.
equation,
Yes, there are.
and some that
Well,
should not?
It's a set formula. You can't move things around as you suggest.
Yeah.
Every number is in there because all your operating revenue and all your operating expenditures are in there, with the exception, again, because it's taken out, since it's not a cash item, your depreciation
Depreciation?
is
Yeah,
not
yeah.
included. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, good.
Kathy,
Thank
you had
you.
a question?
More a comment, since we're kind of talking about the debt ratio, maybe it would be helpful just for our own information. I started writing down when you talked about the formula, but just so we have the formula so we know, because it is a mathematical equation that we can't just plug any numbers in. But if we know what the formula is, then I think everybody will have more peace of mind. And my assumption is because we have 1.3, it helps us get better ratings if we can guarantee higher than 1.
And the higher we are, the better the ratings the next go around.
Yeah.
And we have shown
Right.
in the past, like we've starred the different line items. So that can be easy enough next month for Al to do, and we can show
Yeah.
that.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
You're
So
welcome.
item 8C, director's reports. You want to start, Louis?
Sure. I'll start. I'll start on a meeting that I attended with Matt and the GM. We were talking about the GM issues, obviously. And then I also I attended the finance committee meeting this month. So those were the two meetings that I attended besides this one.
And
And
did you go to HIA too? No, that was.
No, I did not go
Okay,
to
okay,
HIA.
Okay.
And the agenda meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Nothing to report, just looking for rain.
Right.
Look up.
Kathy?
Nothing to report either. Maybe just we could do a rain dance or something.
All right. So
Just got the costume.
So I had more meetings than usual this month. I did go to HIA, and they had a presentation looking at essentially trying to create a consensus on creating a per square foot development fee in the San Carlos Belmont area that would cover community improvements and utilities to facilitate development in that area along Industrial Boulevard and east of El Camino, between essentially Ralston and Holly. And their biggest item that they were talking about was flood control because of the Belmont Creek problems and the flooding that's on the maps, and some of the development that's looking at it is the risk of flooding. They had some flooding in October along Old County Road, Quarry type of thing. So the real estate people who were in HIA were saying, oh, well, you know, we think it would be about $250 million for all of the improvements that is really needed in this area. And not just flood control. The flood control, Tammy, the flood control is more like 15 to $20 million.
Yeah, it was
like
huge.
that.
That's about right.
I mean, it's a big number for that particular area, but they were getting more into a lot of street improvements and other types of things. It wasn't really clear what they were including in there. But I think this was sort of a trial balloon more than anything else. Both, let's see, San Carlos is not doing the district election process.
Nope.
But Belmont is, and they are in the throes of doing it. So they were talking about that to some extent, and just talking about how much development they're getting. And then I also went to the agenda meeting and the finance committee meeting. So a few things anyway.
Yeah, thank you guys for the finance committee work. I know it's going to be busy and we appreciate your availability.
Okay, item 9, communications. We have any communications we need to hear about?
None from staff.
Good. And on that note, I think we can adjourn until, gee, we're going to have meetings coming up how many times in the next month?
Plenty. I mean, May, yeah, you're going to have a few this month in April and a few in May. Yes. you
Right.
are.
Okay.
So we'll make sure there's a quorum, but thank you guys for, being available and all those calendar invites I sent you. I know it was a lot.
Right. Okay. Have a good evening, all.
Thank you
all
very
for
much.
attending.
Have a great
Good
evening.
night.
See
Good
you
night.
all.
Good night.
Take care. Good night.